Chapter 739, His name is Zhang Xian, it's true. That's great. Upon hearing school head Zhao's confirmation on the matter, the faces of Yuan Hong and the others flushed crimson in agitation. As six-star pinnacle blacksmiths, they understood the significance of the words, Wu Yangzi, to Hong Yuan Empire. Back then, when this esteemed elder disappeared without a trace, a huge turmoil broke out in the blacksmith guild. Countless men stepped forth to lead the search for his whereabouts, but their efforts ended in futility. Who could have thought that the ones who would eventually uncover his traces would be the students of the Master Teacher Academy? They could already foresee the huge commotion that would occur with the announcement regarding the discovery of this corpse. This would boost the blacksmith school's prestige amongst the students and blacksmiths. You have done well. I'll have the school reward you handsomely for your accomplishments. Zhao Bingxiu nodded in commendation as he gazed at the students before him, proud of them. To be honest, he had also attempted to uncover Elder Wu Yangzi's trails when he was younger, but he eventually found himself stumbling upon a dead end, leaving him no choice but to give up. Thank you, school head Zhao. Xing Yuan and the others clasped their fists. Vice School Head Xiong Bing had thought that it would be difficult for them to succeed when they first applied for the mission, so he didn't bother offering much of a reward. However, with such great achievement, locating Wu Yangzi's whereabouts and finding his remains, it was natural that the reward should be increased significantly. Since you have found Elder Wu Yangzi's body, regarding his heritage, one of the vice school heads couldn't help but ask anxiously. Back then, when the esteemed Wu Yangzi disappeared from the world, he didn't leave behind his heritage. This was also part of the reason why after his disappearance, many had searched far and wide for his whereabouts, in hopes of uncovering his heritage. Since these students were able to find his remains, could they have obtained his heritage as well? Given their current capability, Wu Yangzi's heritage was no longer crucial to them. They also wouldn't stoop so low as to steal the heritage from the students either, especially given their standing. However, if the blacksmith school could obtain Wu Yangzi's heritage, it would definitely allow many of their blacksmiths to advance their smithing proficiency. This was beneficial to the entire blacksmith school. We managed to find his heritage at the same time. I was also accepted as Elder Wu Yangzi's direct disciple. However, I won't be able to make the call to contribute the heritage to the school by myself. The one who spoke this time around was Luo Qiqi. You found Elder Wu Yangzi's heritage. You can't make the call yourself. True, your group did go through a lot of effort to obtain the heritage. You should indeed discuss among yourselves before coming to a decision. Don't worry, if you don't wish to make it public, I promise that no one will be able to make things difficult for you. The Master Teacher Pavilion has its own rules. There will be no one who would risk bringing the ire of the Master Teacher Pavilion upon themselves for a heritage. Upon hearing that the group had obtained the heritage, everyone was astonished. But soon, they nodded in agreement. The responsibility of Master Teachers was to impart knowledge and enlighten the masses. But as noble as their mission was, they were still mortal, and they had their own desires and interests. It would be unreasonable to expect them to impart everything they knew selflessly to others. It was precisely for this reason that there was a classification between direct disciple, normal students, and listening in. Those who were listening in would only be imparted the bare fundamentals, whereas the direct disciples would be taught the most profound of techniques. This was also the reason why the standing of direct disciples was higher than those listening in, with the latter having to address the former as senior. Since Luo Qiqi had become Wu Yangzi's direct disciple and inherited his heritage, it should belong to her. If she was willing to pass it on, that would be goodwill on her part. However, if she was unwilling to do so, they weren't in a position to say anything either. This was the magnanimity that master teachers should have. Otherwise, how could they be qualified to enlighten the masses? Rather than saying our group went through a lot of effort, it would be more accurate to say that that person went through a lot of effort as long as he agrees. I believe that Qiqi will be more than willing to contribute the heritage to the blacksmith school. Realizing that there was some misunderstanding between them, Yu Fei'er quickly stepped forward to explain. That person? Zhao Bingxiu, Yuan Hong, and the others glanced at one another doubtfully. Indeed. Not only was that person the one who helped us obtain the heritage, he even saved all of us. If not for him, we might have died within the underground chamber. Gratitude gleamed in Luo Qiqi's eyes as she spoke. We can forego the rewards that school head Zhao has promised us as long as he is amply rewarded. Xing Yuan added. Even though he was frustrated by the complicated relationship between Princess Yufei and that fellow, he still felt obliged to repay the other party for saving their lives. Sensing the earnest tone behind the duo's words, Zhao Bingshu frowned. What happened? Did you encounter some kind of danger while seeking Elder Wu Yangzi? Wu Yangzi's disappearance back then was extremely abrupt. There was no signs or marks left behind, as if he had vanished into thin air. Even Zhao Bingshu, despite his immense authority, could only fathom a guess on the happenings, deducing that the otherworldly demons might have been involved in this matter. But as for the truth, there was no one who could say for sure. Furthermore, after such a long time had passed, whatever existing danger back then should have already dissipated. Dangerous can't possibly summarize what we went through. Elder Wu Yangzi was captured by the otherworldly demons back then, and here is a personal note he left behind. Luo Qiqi nodded as she passed a book over. This was the notebook which they obtained from Wu Yangzi back in the underground chamber. Written on it was the happenings in his capture and his experiences with the otherworldly demons in the underground chamber. This, after reading through the note, Zhao Bingshu's eyes narrowed. Otherworldly demon puppet? Could it be that you have met those in the underground chamber? Indeed. Due to a moment of carelessness, we ended up being surrounded, and we were almost killed. Despite the danger, that person stepped forward and saved us. Furthermore, in order to destroy those puppets, he even destroyed the underground chamber, burying himself with them. Luo Qiqi recounted the affairs that happened that day. Upon hearing about how that person stood bravely against an otherworldly demon puppet to save Luo Qiqi, everyone fell silent. They tried putting themselves in the other party's shoes, but they realized that it would be difficult for them to put themselves in danger in order to save a mere acquaintance. Furthermore, that person even handed the heritage over to Luo Qiqi without even taking a glance at it. Very few would be willing to do so if put in his position. There was no blacksmith who could remain unmoved before Wu Yangzi's heritage, and yet, that person willingly gave the opportunity to Luo Qiqi. It would be hard to find anyone as noble as he was. As the 5 school head and vice school heads listened to how that person braved through many Saint Realm otherworldly demon puppets without regard for his life in order to save Yufei and the others, their mouths opened wide in astonishment. If those otherworldly demon puppets were to escape from the underground chamber, they would pose a fatal threat to Huanyu Empire and perhaps even Hongyuan Empire. Many will suffer under their tyranny. His actions have saved all of us. He's truly a noble person. Indeed. Putting his life on the line, he attracted all of the otherworldly demon puppets away and collapsed the underground chamber so as to stop them putting the lives of others above his. He's indeed a true master teacher. A long moment later, Zhao Bingshu and the others finally spoke up, nodding in admiration and awe for the other party. To charge into a despairing situation for humanity, there was nothing greater than that. Unwittingly, they thought of Kong Shi. Back then, Kong Shi had established the master-teacher occupation for the advancement of mankind. After tens of thousand years, the otherworldly demonic tribe had long disappeared. While the master-teacher pavilion had managed to remain true to its aims, the number hot-blooded master-teachers who were willing to truly put their life on the line for humanity had been decreasing over the years, perhaps even disappearing entirely. Who would have known that they would find one right in their master-teacher academy? He's really a respectable master teacher. Xing Yuan nodded. He was the one who helped me obtain this heritage. As long as he gives his consent, I'll contribute it to the blacksmith school without any hesitation. Luo Qiqi said. It was through Zhang Shi's blood and sweat that they obtained Wu Yangzi's heritage. If he agrees to it, she would hand it over straight away. Otherwise, even at the risk of her life, she wouldn't divulge a single word about it. Judging from how noble that person you spoke of is, I'm sure he'll be more than willing to contribute this valuable knowledge to the masses. Yuan Hong remarked. I'm sure he will. He's such a person after all. After a moment of thought, Luo Qiqi nodded. Her apothecary teacher might be young, but he wasn't one who was obsessed with gains and losses. Even if she were to seek his permission for this matter, he would surely give his consent without any hesitation. I'll contribute Wu Yangzi's heritage to the blacksmith school then. However, I hope that the school can reward him for his efforts. With those words, Luo Qiqi flicked her wrist and took out a book. It was the secret manual which many would go into a frenzy in order to obtain it, Wu Yangzi's personal smithing technique, zither forging technique. This, flipping through the book casually, Zhao Bingxiu could tell that it was authentic instantly, and his eyes reddened in agitation. The various interpretations and comprehension of smithing in the manual were refreshing and novel. If this could be imparted to the students of the blacksmith school, their smithing proficiency would definitely be raised by leaps and bounds. Even Zhao Bingxiu himself might be able to surpass his bottleneck and reach higher realms in his smithing with this. That person is indeed a great man. He has contributed greatly to humanity. Where is that person now? Is he still alive? Zhao Bingxiu asked hesitantly. Luo Qiqi had only said that that person chose to willingly remain in the underground chamber in order to save them, not mentioning whether he had survived that ordeal or not. If that person was still alive, the blacksmith school would have to reward him handsomely for his immense contributions. If he had already passed away, they would ensure that his family members are well taken of so as to honor his deeds. He's alive, of course he's alive. Not expecting for there to be such a misunderstanding, Luo Qiqi hurriedly clarified. Not only is he alive, he has also participated in the entrance examination, and he should be a freshman in the academy now. They hadn't heard from Zhang Xian whether he had passed the entrance examination or not, but given his capability, it shouldn't pose a problem to him at all. Freshman? You mean to say that that person who saved you is a freshman of our academy? Zhao Bingxiu was stunned. The other vice school heads were also dumbstruck by that revelation. When they heard that that person had selflessly put his life at stake to save them, they had thought that he would be a 5-star master teacher a minimum, or perhaps even beyond that. Who could have thought that it would be a humble freshman in their academy? That's right. Luo Qiqi nodded. I see. What is his name then? I'll send someone to find him and convince him to join our blacksmith school. Yuan Hong said. Putting everything aside, just by the fact that he had contributed the zither forging technique to the blacksmith school would earn him the respect of countless students here. He's my apothecary teacher. His name is Zhang Xian. Luo Qiqi announced proudly. Zhang Xian. Yuan Hong froze for an instant as his body trembled to that familiar his name. With a shaky voice, he asked, Is that Zhang Xian you spoke, a young man in his 20s, around this tall, and has a fair complexion? Chapter 740, Meritorious. Upon hearing Vice School Head Yuan's words, Luo Qiqi pondered for a moment before nodding. Teacher is indeed in his 20s, and he does have fair complexion. After cultivating the quintuple incandescence golden body, his body became as smooth and flawless as an infant. It wouldn't be inaccurate to describe him as possessing fair complexion. Zhang Xian, a freshman, and in his 20s, Yuan Hong felt frenzied. The person who had just caused immense destruction in the blacksmith guild also went by the same name, and the description fits to AT as well. What's wrong, Vice School Head Yuan? Seeing Yuan Hong going into a daze after asking that question, Zhao Bingxiu couldn't help but ask doubtfully. Could it be that you know Zhang Shi? Yuan Hong had no idea how he should answer that question. Still in disbelief, he turned to Luo Qiqi and asked once again, Does Zhang Shi has a formidable teacher who is a master teacher beyond 6-star? Are you referring to Yang Shi? I'm not too sure about the details, but it does seem like he possesses means beyond a normal 6-star master teacher. Luo Qiqi nodded. Yang Shi, Yang Xian. Yuan Hong's body shook intensely. There was no need to ask any further, there was overwhelming evidence to say that the two people described were the same person. That fellow had reported himself as Yang Xian's student. He was also a freshman in his 20s, and the names were similar too. No matter how you look at it, they were definitely the same person. What the heck was this? As soon as he arrived at the academy, the first thing he did was to destroy the Chamber of Earth Flame before reducing the entire passageway of records to ruins, leaving the Blacksmith Guild in tatters. He thought that he might be a student sent from the other schools to wreak havoc in the blacksmith school, but who could have thought that he had such a background? Putting his life on the line to face the otherworldly demons alone, giving away Wu Yangzi's heritage without any hesitation, every single one of these deeds was incredibly noble, leaving those who have heard of them with nothing but awe for him. A conceited god of destruction and a selfless master teacher, how could they possibly be the same person? Was he suffering from dissociative identity disorder? What's wrong? Seeing Yuan Hong's face slowly being reduced to tears, Zhao Bingshu asked once more. As a 6-star master teacher, Yuan Hong should have at least reached a level where he could conceal his emotions. Why would he still show such a depressed expression? It's like this. Didn't I just said that I had something I needed to report to you? Hearing school head Zhao's question, Yuan Hong swiftly recovered and clasped his fist. Zhao Bingshu nodded. What is it? Previously, right after Vice School Head Xiong spoke, Yuan Hong did say that he had something to report as well. That is, the passageway of records has collapsed, and half of the Blacksmith Guild has been destroyed. Yuan Hong's face reddened in embarrassment. Despite being the person in charge of the examination facilities in the blacksmith school, the area under his jurisdiction ended up being destroyed by a record challenger. He would probably become a laughingstock for the other vice school heads. The passageway of records and half of the Blacksmith Guild has been destroyed? Is there an attack by the otherworldly demons? Zhao Bingshu's eyebrows shot up in alarm. As they had been busy discussing inside the office, and communication with the external world had been terminated, they hadn't received news about the matter yet. However, the passageway of records was constructed and reinforced with incredibly resilient materials, allowing it to withstand the trial of time over several millenniums. Unless there was an invasion by the otherworldly demons, how could it collapse all of the sudden? That's not it. Not expecting school head Zhao to actually make such a connection, Yuan Hong hurriedly clarified it awkwardly. Someone came to challenge the Chamber of Earth Flame. Yuan Hong swiftly went through the happenings of the incident. You are saying that someone survived in the Chamber of Earth Flame for over 2 hours? And when he finally came out, the chamber collapsed, and the Earth Flame hearts were completely depleted? On top of that, he used Earth Flame to substitute as a catalyst for the Earth Flame hearts and successfully repaired the chamber. However, as soon as you stepped in, it exploded? After hearing Yuan Hong's recount, the other vice school heads stared at him as if they had seen a ghost. To survive the blistering heat in the Chamber of Earth Flame for 2 hours straight, and even recreating it with Earth Flame, are you for real? Was that even something a 4-star master teacher was capable of? One must know that even they, as 6-star master teachers, were incapable of doing the same. Yes, Yuan Hong nodded. The person who caused the commotion also goes by the name of Zhang Xian, and he's a freshman as well. His name is Zhang Xian. Could they be the same person? To be able to save his peers from the otherworldly demon puppets and destroy the underground chamber to trap them down there, Zhang Shi possessed both courage and wits. Only someone like him could possess such great capability. The other vice school heads remarked. If someone had told them that a person had endured 2 hours in the Chamber of Earth Flame and destroyed half of the Blacksmith Guild, they would have never believed it. However, after hearing about the incredible exploits of Zhang Shi, these feats seemed to be nothing much in comparison. The Chamber of Earth Flame serves to test the resilience of one's physical body. The longer one can remain in there, the stronger one's physical body is deemed to be. If the both Zhang Shi are the same person, considering that he had inherited Elder Wu Yangzi's heritage and cultivated the quintuple incandescence golden body, it wouldn't be too difficult for him to last 2 hours inside. Zhao Bingshu nodded. His first thought upon hearing that someone had lasted 2 hours in the chamber of earth flame was disbelief as well, but as he recalled the matter regarding Wu Yangzi's heritage, he couldn't help but consider the possibility. Even though he had never seen the quintuple incandescence golden body before, it was famed to be the best physical body cultivation technique in Hongyuan Empire, paving the way for Wu Yangzi to become the best blacksmith here. I didn't know. I thought that he was intentionally causing trouble, so I demanded him to compensate for the damages, Hong Yuan said anxiously. If he had known that Zhang Xian had really endured the heat in the chamber of earth flame with his own strength, he wouldn't have caused such a fuss. Ultimately, the chamber of earth flame was a record challenge. If Zhang Shi had truly endured the heat in the chamber of earth flame with his own capability, it could only be said that the chamber of earth flame was not sufficiently well built to match up to his capability to demand the challenger to pay for the reparation under such circumstances was a massive humiliation for the blacksmith school. And if Yuan Hong hadn't asked for compensation, the mess that came afterward wouldn't have occurred either. We can't blame him for this issue. There is indeed a huge flaw with the design of the chamber of earth flame, resulting in its inability to hold up in the face of a true expert, Zhao Bingshu sighed. You're right. Yuan Hong nodded. But now, the damage is no longer limited to just the chamber of earth flame. The entire passageway of records and half of the guild has been destroyed. What should we do about that? If it had just been the chamber of earth flame, they could easily forego it. After all, 10 high-tier spirit stones wasn't a huge sum for the blacksmith school. However, the damage had gone way farther than that. Regarding that, let's just call off the debt. After a long contemplation, Zhao Bingshu waved his hand and sighed. Call it off. How can we? Yuan Hong exclaimed in shock. If they were to simply call it off, the blacksmith school would be incurring a debt of several thousand high-tier spirit stones. As rich as they were, that was still an immense burden on them. Are you thinking about the loss? His contribution of the zither forging technique to our blacksmith school goes way farther than a few thousand high-tier spirit stones. Zhao Bingshu shook his head. Wu Yangzi's heritage would boost the skills of the members of the blacksmith school by leaps and bounds. Zhang Xian's contribution would benefit generations of students to come, and that was worth far more than a few thousand high-tier spirit stones. If needed, the blacksmith school was willing to fork out even several 10,000 high-tier spirit stones for Wu Yangzi's heritage if it had to. The zither forging technique was not only elegant, it made smithing into an art form. This encouraged immersion in their work, allowing them to raise their understanding of smithing subconsciously as they worked. With this secret manual in hand, the blacksmith school could very well overtake the apothecary school within a decade, becoming the number school in Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy. Even Zhao Bingshu, the head of the blacksmith school, was incapable of such a feat, so how could such contribution be valued only at a few thousand high-tier spirit stones? They were on two totally different levels. Given the immense contributions that Zhang Xian had made to the school, if they were to continue demanding compensation from the other party over such a minor matter, wouldn't they make the other students disillusioned about the school? Indeed. Not only should we cancel the compensation, we should reward him even. It's only right for us to reward such talents to retain them in our blacksmith school. The other vice school heads expressed their support on the matter as well. There were many schools in the master teacher, so the competition over talents was extremely rife. No matter what, they had to retain a talent like Zhang Shi in the blacksmith school and have it become his main supporting occupation. This way, if he were to make his name in the world, the school's reputation would also rise along with his. On the other hand, Yuan Hong's mouth twitched. That fellow had nearly destroyed the entire branch, and not only were they not going to penalize him, they were going to reward him even if that was the case. Wouldn't he lose his authority among the students? Nevertheless, he had no choice but to acknowledge school head Zhao's words. Contributing the zither forging technique to the blacksmith school was indeed a huge merit. Even if Zhang Xian were to wreak havoc upon the entire blacksmith school, as long as no students were hurt in the process, his merit could easily wipe off his wrongdoings. In the end, the core of the Master Teacher Academy lay in its people. As long as they had sufficient talents, the academy could always be rebuilt. The master-teacher pavilion in the higher-ranked empires had been assaulted by the otherworldly demonic tribe many times, and its facilities and libraries had been destroyed again and again. However, the heritage of master-teachers still lived on, guiding humanity to greater heights. Alright, the matter is decided then. Right, didn't you say that he intends to take the 5-star blacksmith examination? Bring him to the ocean of weapons then. As long as he clears the examination, I'll take him in as my student, Zhao Bingshu chuckled. It would be ideal if he could accept such a genius as his student. Yes. Yuan Hong nodded. As for the rest of you, you have done well in the mission as well. I'll obtain a few pills from the apothecary school for you and conduct a meridian and bone cleansing for you personally. Zhao Bingshu turned to Luo Qiqi and the others and said. Meridian and bone cleansing? Thank you, school head Zhao. Upon hearing those words, the faces of Luo Qiqi and the others flushed in agitation. Considering that it was a meridian and bone cleansing by one of the 10 great master teachers, were it to succeed, they would be able to progress from straight to half-saint without facing any bottlenecks in their cultivation. Meridian and bone cleansing was an extremely exhausting process. Even a Saint Realm expert wouldn't do so easily. In that aspect, this was the best reward they could receive. It was far better than earning academic credits. Yuan Hong, you should bring Zhang Shi to the examination hall now. Make sure to treat him amiably, don't give him the idea that our blacksmith school mistreats meritorious students. Zhao Bingshu instructed sternly. Yes. With a lowered head, Yuan Hong walked out from the office, and a bitter smile emerged on his lips. When he first arrived at the office, he was still thinking about having the school head to issue a severe punishment to Zhang Xian. Who could have thought that there would be such a huge turnaround? How did things turn to this? Just the thought of it left him extremely stifled within. Chapter 741, I am not a blacksmith yet, what's going on? Did you see that? This fellow cheated in the Chamber of Earth Flame challenge and destroyed the entire area. On top of that, he even intentionally directed the Earth Flame to tear down the passageway of records. Is that fellow insane, or is he simply sick of living? I have no clue either, but since it isn't a matter involving us, let's just watch quietly. A portion of the guild collapsing was no trifling matter. Before long, a huge crowd had already gathered around the area, each busy asking one another to satisfy their curiosity. When they learned that it was a freshman who had caused such a huge uproar, pity immediately surfaced in their eyes. Even if he was tired of living, this wasn't how he should seek the end. They were in the Master Teacher Academy, not some countryside school. To cause such a mess and be caught personally by Vice School Head Yuan Hong at that. It would be perfectly accurate to say that he was a goner. Even if he were to spend his life working here, he would never be able to pay off the debt. Stand obediently. Luo Yan glared at the young man coldly. Knowing that his teacher was truly infuriated by this matter, he dispatched 8 experts to guard this fellow. If not for fear that it might reflect badly on them, he would have already had him pummeled. For a freshman to go about wreaking havoc instead of staying put in the freshman area, he deserved it even if he was expelled from the academy. I don't mean to do anything, I just want to check on the other mechanisms in the passageway of records and see if they can be fixed. Seeing how the other students were so guarded against him as if he was a burglar out to steal their valuables, Zhang Xian sighed deeply. He was also very apologetic that such a situation had occurred. All he'd wanted to do was take the 5-star blacksmith examination quietly. Never had he thought that he would end up in such a state. In the end, he allowed greed to get the better of him. Earth flame hearts were extremely valuable commodities, and who knows how long it would be before he could encounter another one. Furthermore, he also hadn't thought that the renowned earth flame heart's reputation would precede its capability. He had already tried to limit himself, thinking that he would stop once his soul reached 10 meters, but it coincidentally broke down right when he reached that mark. And as for the repairs, how could he have known that the esteemed blacksmith school would end up skimming on a formation plate used to draw earth flame? But it was all too late now. The only thing he could do now was try to salvage the situation as best he could. Otherwise, if he were to really incur a debt of 3,000 high-tier spirit stones, he would end up wasting many years here. You are thinking of repairing the other mechanisms? Let me tell you, if you dare to lay even a finger on them, don't blame me for getting nasty. Seeing that the other party lacked the slightest remorse for his actions, attempting to put his demonic claws on the other mechanisms as well, Luo Yan's rage immediately flurried. What the hell is this? If it wasn't for your fixing, would the blacksmith guild have been reduced to ruins? If you don't have the ability to fix it, don't even try it in the first place. I can really fix them. What happened a moment ago was just an accident. Zhang Xian hurriedly explained. I can prove it to you. Bring me a higher quality formation plate, and I'll fix the chamber of earth flame before your eyes. You're seeking death. Seeing how that fellow was still prattling on despite all he had done, Luo Yan's rage finally reached its breaking point. A powerful aura gushed forth as he thrusted his palm toward the conceited fellow before him. Hula! As a 5-star pinnacle blacksmith, his cultivation had already reached transcendent mortal 8-dan ethereal treading realm. His palm thrust was bursting with might, threatening to tear apart the fabric of space. Stop! Just as the palm was about to reach Zhang Xian, a loud bellow suddenly sounded from afar. A silhouette rushed forward, and with a light flick of his hand, he dispelled the jinqi that Luo Yan had gathered behind his strike. Dang 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 dang. Luo Yan's face reddened, and he was pushed several steps back. A dull pain resonated throughout his body as his jinqi fell into disarray with his offense abruptly dispelled. Upon catching a clear sight of the figure who had stopped his offense, Luo Yan froze. Teacher. It was no other than his teacher, who was dying to strangle Zhang Xian a moment ago. Wasn't his teacher extremely furious with this fellow? Why would he stop him from teaching this fellow a lesson? Bewildered, he was just about to ask his teacher about the matter when the latter suddenly turned around to look at the young man behind him with a bright smile on his face. Are you all right? Are you injured? How dare that unfilial student of mine lay his hands on you? Shall I teach him a lesson in your stead? Ah! Hearing those words, Luo Yan's body staggered from shock. What was this madness unfolding before him? Was the person he was seeing really his teacher, the vice head of the blacksmith school? Wasn't he dying to strangle that fellow to death a moment ago? Why did his attitude suddenly make a 180-degree change? Didn't you say that vice school head Yuan is extremely angry? Given that the branch has suffered such severe damage, who wouldn't be angry in his position? But that response of his. It doesn't seem like he's angry at all. That is a gross understatement. Look carefully, don't you feel that he's fawning over that freshman? Fawning? You are exaggerating. Vice School Head Yuan is a 6-star pinnacle master teacher and blacksmith. With such esteemed standing, is there anyone in the school he needs to fawn over? All of the students who had gathered for the commotion were also dumbfounded. With the branch suffering such catastrophic damage, they'd thought that the freshman behind it would be heavily punished to send out a stern warning to the others. But if that was the case, what was with that declaration to teach Luo Yan a lesson? That bright smile and that attitude. No matter how one looked at it, surely the vice school head was trying to fawn over that fellow. Teach him a lesson. There's no need for that, I'm fine. They weren't the only ones who were baffled by the situation, even Zhang Xian, the perpetrator of this entire incident, was confused by the abrupt twist in the plot. Didn't this elder march off furiously to the school head's office to bring forth a heavy penalty upon him? Why would he suddenly treat him so kindly? It's good that you're fine. Yuan Hong heaved a sigh of relief. Following which, he turned his gaze to Luo Yan and bellowed, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and apologize to Zhang Shi." Ever since leaving the school head's office, Yuan Hong had rushed all the way back here, fearing that the students might have laid their hands on Zhang Xian. And it was fortunate that he did. If that palm were to land on Zhang Xian, it would strike out whatever goodwill he had for the blacksmith school along with it. If that were to happen, how were they going to keep him in the blacksmith school? One must know that the school head had already expressed his interest in accepting him as his direct disciple. If he were to reject the blacksmith school due to Luo Yan's slap, how was he going to explain this matter to the school head? This unfilial student of his had nearly gotten him into deep trouble. Apologize? Luo Yan couldn't help but feel that the world had gone bonkers. Teacher, why should I apologize to him? He destroyed the passageway of records and half of the blacksmith guild. Enough. But before Luo Yan could finish his words, Yuan Hong interrupted furiously. Waving his hands in annoyance, he roared sharply, "Return back to your quarters and reflect on what you have done. Without my orders, you are not to leave your room. Just apologize when I tell you to. Do you need to spout so much nonsense? Are you only going to be content when you land me into deep trouble?" Teacher. Hearing that his teacher was going to ground him for no good reason, Luo Yan seethed with indignation, unable to accept what was happening before him. At the same time, the others in the area also glanced at one another, uncomprehending of what Yuan Hong was up to. What are you all standing around for? The group over there, take Luo Yan back to his quarters. Yuan Hong instructed sternly. After issuing those orders, Yuan Hong turned his gaze back to Zhang Xian and said politely, "Zhang Shi, aren't you intending to take the 5-star blacksmith examination? Allow me to bring you to the Ocean of Weapons." Ocean of Weapons? But I don't have any academic credits. Zhang Xian uttered in bewilderment. What is wrong with this fellow? Did he bump his head somewhere? It is one thing to teach Luo Yan a lesson, but to bring me to the Ocean of Weapons as well? I thought that the Ocean of Weapons is only open to those with ample academic credits. You don't have any academic credits? Don't worry, that's not a problem at all. The group over there, wait there for a moment. Luo Yan, take out your academic credit token and give Zhang Shi too. Ordered Yuan Hong as he turned to the departing group. Hearing those words, Luo Yan nearly burst into tears from sheer indignation. Why should I? That fellow caused a huge mess over here, but not only are you sparing him from punishment, you are even asking me to give him academic credits? Isn't this favoritism too much? Stop wasting time, hurry up. Yuan Hong frowned. All right. Nevertheless, Luo Yan dared not disobey the commands of his teachers, so he obediently passed his academic credit card over. Students were allowed to transfer academic credits amongst themselves as well. Given that Zhang Xian hadn't received his identity token yet, it went without saying that he hadn't received an academic credit card as well. However, such a small issue couldn't possibly stumble a vice school head. With a flick of his wrist, Yuan Hong took out an empty card and transferred 2 points into it from Luo Yan's card. All right, Zhang Shi. We have the academic credits now, so let's go. After doing what had to be done, Yuan Hong turned to Zhang Xian with a smile and gestured for him to head forward. Zhang Xian blinked in a daze, overwhelmed by the happenings before him. He pointed to the rubble in the area blankly and asked, "This? Don't I have to compensate for this?" "You don't have to worry about it. This isn't your fault, so you won't have to compensate for this. I'll have someone fix it up later," Yuan Hong replied. "This? All right then." Even though Zhang Xian had no idea what was going on, he was still relieved to hear that he was excused from payment. 3,000 high-tier spirit stones was way beyond his means. It would be best if he could be spared from compensation. Is this really the austere vice school head Yuan that I know? What kind of play is this? It was just a moment ago that vice school head Yuan looked as if he was going to tear that fellow apart. Yet, in just a few short moments, he suddenly became like that. Taking that scene into sight, the master teachers gathered in the area were trembling in frenzy. This was a branch of the blacksmith guild. That fellow had caused the collapse of half of the entire building, and yet, not only was he not criticized for it, he was even granted so many privileges. This was way too abnormal. Such a feeling resonated particularly strongly with Li Xian amidst the crowd. Her body was trembling uncontrollably, and she nearly fainted from the sight. She had been the one to show that fellow around ever since he'd arrived at the blacksmith guild, and all this time, she had thought of him as a conceited and naive freshman. For such a person to actually win vice school head Yuan's favor, what was this world turning into? Despite racking his brain, Zhang Xian was unable to find any logical reason as to why the attitude of the elder before him would change so abruptly. In the end, he could only attribute it to Elder Mo and Pavilion Master Mo's halo. Sighing deeply, he followed Yuan Hong to the other half of the blacksmith guild, which had, fortunately, remained intact despite the previous explosion. Before long, he was standing before a towering door. Zhang Shi, this is the entrance to the ocean of weapons. To take the 5-star blacksmith examination, you just have to place your academic credit card and 4-star emblem on the stone pedestal over there and step through the door, and you will be brought to the corresponding examination area. With a gentle smile, Yuan Hong gestured. Just like the passageway of records, the ocean of weapons was also a complex mechanism created using many unique materials. In order to activate it, one would require sufficient academic credits in their card, as well as an emblem a rank lower than the examination one was going to take. With these two objects, one would be able to activate the mechanism and take the corresponding examination. This was an extremely efficient system which spared the Blacksmith Guild from having to devote too much manpower into manning its examination facilities. I need a 4-star emblem for the examination. Zhang Xian was taken aback. Indeed. Since Zhang Shi is here to take the 5-star examination, I believe you should already have the 4-star emblem in your possession. Don't worry, any emblem distributed by the Blacksmith Guild is usable here. Yuan Hong explained, thinking that Zhang Xian was worried that the blacksmith emblem which he'd obtained elsewhere might not be usable here. This. Zhang Xian scratched his head awkwardly. Is an emblem really required? What do I have to do if I don't have one? Don't have one. Yuan Hong froze. What do you mean by that? Zhang Xian blushed in embarrassment. That is. I have yet to take a blacksmith examination. The truth is that I am actually not a blacksmith yet. Chapter 742, Taking the Blacksmith Examination, You aren't a blacksmith yet? Yuan Hong's body swayed weakly from sheer shock, and he nearly spewed a mouthful of blood onto the other party's face. The other master teachers who had gathered in the area out of curiosity also had their eyes bulging in astonishment. You aren't a blacksmith, and yet you are here to take the 5-star examination? And you still dare to say that you aren't here to cause trouble? Blacksmithing was a part of the Upper Nine Paths, one of the most prestigious occupations in the continent. Countless had devoted innumerable years of their lives to refining their skills, forsaking sleep and meals just to be accepted into this esteemed organization. Even the most talented of blacksmiths would require a decade of training before they could challenge the 5-star organization. Those who were less talented might even take 50 years just to prepare for it. And yet, a 20-year-old fellow who wasn't even a 1-star blacksmith actually wanted to challenge the 5-star examination? Did you think that blacksmith is an occupation which you could master on a whim? You are taking it way too lightly. I have learnt smithing on my private time, I just haven't had the time to take the examination yet. Noticing everyone's dumbfounded gaze, realization struck Zhang Xian, and he hurriedly came up with an explanation. Since that's the case, why don't I start from the 1-star examination? Is it possible to take the 1-star examination here? Or do I have to take the apprentice examination first? Even though Zhang Xian's smithing capability was above even that of Wu Yangzi, he had never taken any blacksmith examination before. In terms of ranking, he was currently even beneath that of an apprentice, let alone a blacksmith. Apprentice. Hearing those words, Yuan Hong's lips twitched, and he grabbed his face in frustration. If he hadn't witnessed this sight for himself, he would never have believed it to be true. To think that a person who wasn't even an apprentice yet would come to the blacksmith school and declare that he was going to take the 5-star examination. On top of that, he even created a huge fuss in the school, collapsing the passageway of records along with half of the entire branch. More importantly, despite all of this, one of the 10 great master teachers, Zhao Bingxiu, was still interested in taking him as his direct disciple. All of this, he had seen with his own eyes. But even so, he couldn't help but feel as though he was in a dream. There's no need for you to take the apprentice examination, you can take the 1-star examination straight. For the time being, just try to pass the 1-star examination first. As for 5-star, we'll talk about it in the future. Suppressing the frustration he was feeling, Yuan Hong turned to the master teacher crowd behind and asked, "Does any of you have an apprentice emblem?" As a 6-star pinnacle blacksmith in the blacksmith school, even his weakest student was a 5-star blacksmith at the minimum. As a result, he didn't have any spare apprentice emblems with him. Apprentice emblem? Is there likely to be anyone with an apprentice emblem in the blacksmith school? The crowd in the area shook their heads. Most of those gathered around were 5-star blacksmiths, and even the weakest of the crowd was a 4-star at the minimum. As such, it would be difficult for them to find an apprentice emblem all of the sudden. This. Yuan Hong looked around awkwardly. What the heck was this? To think that a day would come where a 6-star pinnacle blacksmith like him would end up having to look for an apprentice emblem, and fail to find one at that. Vice School Head Yuan, I have one here. At that moment, a timid voice suddenly sounded. Zhang Xian turned around and saw Li Xian, the female receptionist who had been bringing him around previously, stepping forward and offering her emblem. While she was working at the blacksmith school, she wasn't too involved in the occupation. As a result, she was still an apprentice blacksmith at the moment. Good. Yuan Hong heaved a sigh of relief. Taking the emblem, he imprinted Zhang Xian's name on it before passing it to the latter. Zhang Xian, this shall be your apprentice emblem. With this, you should be able to activate the Ocean of Weapons and take the 1-star blacksmith examination. Thank you. Zhang Xian took the emblem and nodded. He walked up to the stone pedestal, and just as he was about to place his emblem and academic credit card on it, he suddenly recalled something and turned around. If I were to pass the 1-star examination, would I have to expend more academic credits if I wanted to continue taking the 2-star examination? If you remain in the Ocean of Weapons, you won't have to expend any more academic credits. However, once you step out of the doors, you will have to pay more academic credits if you want to enter once more and take the examination again, Yuan Hong replied. With 2 academic credits, one could activate the Ocean of Weapons once. As long as the Ocean of Weapons remained activated, there would be no need for one to expend any more academic credits to reactivate it for the subsequent examinations. In a sense, it was like paying for a ticket to the museum. As long as the entrance fee was paid, one could remain within until closing time. It was only after leaving the museum that one would have to repurchase another ticket to enter its premises once more. Upon hearing that he would have to expend more academic credits to enter the Ocean of Weapons once more if he were to leave the area, Zhang Xian immediately asked worriedly, I won't have to expend any more academic credits as long as I remain within? Then, once I clear the 1-star blacksmith examination, can I proceed on with the 2-star examination? The 2 academic credits he currently had didn't come easily. He would have to spend a great deal of effort in earning more academic credits if he had to spend 2 for each rank promotion. Even if the elder before him was willing to finance him, he would still feel guilty taking the academic credits of others for his own use, especially considering how valuable they were. On top of that, if he were to accept the favor of others without giving an equivalent return, he would owe a karmic debt to the other party. The reason Zhang Xian had been reluctant to accept the favor of others for free all along was due to the messy implications that came along with it. If possible, he would like to avoid it for as long as he could. Of course you can. However, the ocean of weapons will only remain activated for 4 hours regardless of which examination you are taking. Regardless of whether you are able to successfully forge a weapon or not, you will be evicted from the premises once time is up. I don't think that you will have sufficient time to challenge the other examinations after clearing the 1-star examination. Yuan Hong explained. The underlying motive behind the creation of the Ocean of Weapons was to accommodate for a greater number of students in taking the blacksmith examination. Given that, if they were to allow students to camp inside the facility after paying 2 academic credits, wouldn't that be contrary to its primary purpose? As such, a time limit of 4 hours was imposed on the system. Regardless of how one's progress in the examination was, one would be evicted without fail once the time was up, even if their weapon was already on the verge of completion. If a student were to deem that 4 hours was insufficient for them to clear the examination, the student could always pay more academic credits to extend their time. In this case, an academic credit would correspond to an additional 2 hours. If the student successfully cleared the examination, the Ocean of Weapons would distribute a new corresponding emblem. Otherwise, they would leave empty-handed. Since Zhang Xian had 2 academic credits, he would be allowed to stay within the Ocean of Weapons for 4 hours. However, weapon smithing was an extremely lengthy process. 4 hours might be sufficient for him to smith a weapon to clear the 1-star examination, but to be able to smith another one for the 2-star examination in that limited time. It didn't seem too plausible. Besides, smithing was an extremely laborious process that consumed an immense amount of jinqi. Considering Zhang Xian's current cultivation, just smithing a single weapon could easily consume up more than half of his jinqi capacity, so even if there was sufficient time, it would be nigh impossible for him to smith 2 weapons consecutively. As such, while Vice School head Yuan thought that it was good that Zhang Xian was driven, he didn't think that it was a feasible idea. Even he, as a 6-star pinnacle blacksmith, could only smith 2 to 3 weapons within 4 hours. Anything more than that was impossible. Unlike pills, weapons, regardless of their grade, require ceaseless hammering and refinement in order to shape and refine it. 4 hours? All right then. Hearing that he only had this amount of time, Zhang Xian nodded. After clarifying everything, he placed his blacksmith apprentice emblem and academic credit card on the stone pedestal, and with a bright surge of light, the doors to the Ocean of Weapons opened. Without any hesitation, Zhang Xian walked in. The Ocean of Weapons seemed to operate via a mechanism somewhat similar to the passageway of records. The room Zhang Xian stepped into was completely dark, and with an abrupt rumbling beneath his feet, he was transported to a hall. Placed within the hall were all kinds of ores and metals. There was also a large cauldron and furnace by the side. This is supposed to be an illusion. Zhang Xian couldn't help but mutter in awe. Taking a swift glance around him, he realized that everything in this room was extremely vivid and detailed, making it hard to discern it from reality. Previously, the female receptionist, Li Xian, had told him that the Ocean of Weapons utilized an illusion formation in order to simulate a lifelike smithing experience. This was indeed what was happening to Zhang Xian right now. Everything around him was fake, regardless of how real it all looked. Taking a look around him, Zhang Xian saw a pile of books on the table before him. He walked up to it and flipped through them casually. Written in them were the smithing methods of various weapons. Examinees could pick any one of these smithing methods for the examination if they wanted to, but this wasn't a compulsory criterion for the examination. As long as the weapon they smithied reached a certain grade, they would be deemed to have cleared the examination. I only have 4 hours. I must hurry so that I can take the 5-star examination. Knowing that academic credits didn't come easily, Zhang Xian wasn't content with just clearing the 1-star examination. It would be best if he could clear the 5-star examination in a single go so that he wouldn't have to return here again. Thus, it would be best for the weapon I smith to be as simple as possible so as to minimize the time spent on them. There was a clear difference in the difficulty between forging a metal ingot into a sword and hammer, and the time required for the both of them would be different as well. Unlike pill forging where each ingredient must be carefully prepared in order to forge a satisfactory pill, there's no need for me to be too thorough in the forging of the weapon. Since only the grade of the weapon is being assessed here, there's no need for me to pursue perfection. A weapon's grade was determined by factors such as its resilience, flexibility, sharpness, medium for jinqi, and such. Aesthetics took a secondary role in determining the grade of the weapon. While going through the additional effort of hammering the weapon into the perfect shape and size would boost the utility of the weapon as well, this wasn't a vital aspect of the blacksmith examination. Since that was the case, there would be no need for Zhang Xian to spend additional effort on shaping the metal ingot. As long as he were to take careful note of the proportion of metal used in creating the alloy, as well as the refinement and quenching process, he should be able to create a decent weapon. After browsing through the books, Zhang Xian frowned. It'll take too long to hammer the metal ingot into the shapes depicted in these books. Not only would it be hard to do so given his lack of practice in hammering, more importantly, he also didn't have the time to waste on it either. If he were to follow the smithing process listed in any of the books, it would be impossible for him to successfully smith any weapons without at least 2 hours of effort. If that was going to be it, he wouldn't even have enough time to clear the 2-star examination. Forget it, I should just start first. Tossing the book aside, Zhang Xian swiftly examined the 8 ores and metals on the table as he swiftly simulated the various combinations of alloys he could make with them. Having learned the Heaven's Path smith art, his understanding of smithing was already beyond most 6-star pinnacle blacksmiths. While the ores and metals before him were inferior materials that were suited only for smithing low-tier weapons, as long as he were to complement their strengths well, he would still be able to create a decent weapon. Alright, this should do. Zhang Xian muttered as a confident smile crept onto his lips. With a light flick of his wrist, the 8 metals and ores immediately rose from the table and flew into the searing furnace. Tzzzzzzzz. As Zhang Xian infused his jinqi into the furnace, it began to glow crimson. The ores and metals swiftly melted and flowed out of the furnace from a groove by the side. Synthesize. With another flick of his wrist, the metallic fluid separated into 8 distinct fluids, and they began synthesizing with one another through a series of sequences. Chapter 743. Is it too late to practice? With nimble movements from his fingers, Zhang Xian precisely manipulated the metallic fluids with his jinqi. Those metallic fluids clashed with one another in midair, producing resounding melodic metallic clangs reminiscent of the music from a keyboard. If a blacksmith were to be present here, he would surely be left with his mouth agape upon seeing this sight. This was no longer smithing but a performance. It was a melody perfectly aligned with nature. The reason Wu Yangzi's zither forging technique was so sought after was due to its alignment with nature, making the arduous smithing a pleasurable activity. However, the smithing technique that Zhang Xian was utilizing here was clearly far more profound than the zither forging technique. Not only was it an enjoyment to the eyes and the ears, one might even find one's soul resonating in pleasure to it. Heaven's Path smith art. Hoo. Before long, the 8 metallic fluids were completely synthesized with one another, forming a solid alloy. Following which, Zhang Xian threw the alloy into the water trough by the side. Tz la. As soon as the searing metal alloy came into contact with the water, steam immediately rose from the water surface. This was the final step of smithing, quenching. Typically, smithing consisted of 3 steps: synthesizing the metals and ores into an alloy, forging the alloy into its intended form, and quenching the weapon to strengthen the material. Zhang Xian had jumped from the first phase right into the third phase, skipping the second phase. In smithing, the forging phase was extremely important. If a weapon was forged properly, it could enhance its grade as well. Skipping the second phase meant that his work couldn't be considered as a true weapon, and thus, its grade would take a steep fall. However, it also spared him from the most arduous and lengthy process of hammering his weapon into its intended form, thus significantly speeding up his smithing process. The searing alloy caused the calm water in the trough to bubble furiously. After some time, Zhang Xian flicked his wrist, retrieving the alloy from the water. Timing was essential for quenching. The duration for which a weapon was immersed into a quenching fluid would affect the quality of the end product. Zhang Xian had used 8 different types of ores and metals to create his alloy, each with vastly different properties. While they could serve to complement each other's strengths, if he couldn't grasp the perfect timing for the quenching, it could introduce an imbalance within the weapon, causing the various metals and ores to hinder the functions of one another. If that were to happen, the resulting alloy would be severely weakened, turning it into a failed product. Alright, this should be it. Having completed the quenching process, Zhang Xian glanced at the metal lump in his palm and scratched his head awkwardly. If he were to take this metal lump out and call it a weapon, he would surely be mocked by the other blacksmiths, and his reputation would plummet. Fortunately, he was only in a simulation. Sighing deeply, he walked up to the grating pedestal and placed the metal lump on it. The grating pedestal served to gauge the quality of the weapon smithied, and as long as the weapon achieved the required grade, the examinee would be deemed to have cleared the examination. Wang! A light buzz sounded, and a red light glowed. Following which, a mechanic voice announced, using the most basic lava stone, white steel, black pebble, the examinee has managed to smith a phantom lothier weapon. Congratulations, you have passed the 1-star blacksmith examination. This metal lump has reached phantom lothier. Not bad. Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. In truth, this was his first time smithing, so he didn't have a precise gauge of how he had fared. To think that this lump of metal would be considered as a phantom lothier weapon. Weapons could be divided into 5 tiers: God, Saint, Spirit, Phantom, and Mortal. The criterion for clearing the 1-star blacksmith examination was to smith a mortal pinnacle weapon. Even though the weapon Zhang Xian had smithied using the Heaven's Path smith art was crude, bearing no semblance to a weapon whatsoever, it was still graded as a phantom lothier weapon due to the quality of its alloy. If it were to be properly forged into a weapon, it could easily reach phantom intermediate tier or even high tier. After clearing the 1-star examination, Zhang Xian spoke up without any hesitation. I request to challenge the 2-star blacksmith examination. Jiya. The entire area abruptly darkened, and the rumbling of mechanisms whirring into action sounded. By the time the area lit up once more, he was already in another hall. The entire layout was similar to the 1-star examination hall, but the area was visibly larger. There was a larger variety of ores and metals placed on the table in the room, and most of them were higher grade and rarer than the ones offered in the 1-star examination. Time to start work again. After swiftly examining the selection of ores and metals, Zhang Xian picked 17 of them and threw them into the furnace. Working as he had previously, another metal lump was soon standing in front of him before long. This metal lump looked even more horrendous than the previous one smithied. It was completely black, and no one would ever be able to make a correlation between it and a weapon. This was the result of skipping the forging phase of the smithing process. The forging process was essential to giving shape to the alloy. If one wanted a sword, one would have to hammer it into a sword. If one wanted a dagger, one would have to hammer it into a dagger. However, putting aside the fact that this phase was extremely time-consuming, hammering was also a skill that one could only master through hands-on experience. With no prior experience whatsoever, it would be nigh impossible for Zhang Xian to shape the weapons properly even if he were to attempt it in earnest. Since that was the case, he decided to skip it altogether. Once again, he placed the metal lump on the grating pedestal. Wang! With a brilliant flash of red light, a mechanical voice announced, the examinee has managed to smith a phantom intermediate tier weapon. Congratulations, you have passed the 2-star blacksmith examination. After clearing the 2-star blacksmith examination, Zhang Xian immediately moved on to the 3-star. An hour later, taking a deep breath, Zhang Xian said, I request to challenge the 5-star blacksmith examination. After challenging 4 examinations consecutively, he was starting to feel a little drained despite his pure Jinqi. Hoo-la! The mechanisms rumbled into action once more, and an even larger room came into sight. They are all actually the same hall, it's just my perception of it that has changed. After undergoing the venue switching procedure several times, Zhang Xian soon realized that despite the various differences among the examination halls, the location where he was hadn't changed at all. In the first place, the examination halls were only a simulation created by the ocean of weapons, not a real location. As such, changing the venue wasn't a difficult job: a Shenstar rock, purple topaz metal, green dust stone. The materials offered in this examination sure are far better than the ones in the previous examinations. Zhang Xian remarked in awe as he examined the selection of ores and metals in the room. There were plenty of rare materials in the previous 4 examinations as well, but they paled in comparison to the current spread before him. Both the Ashenstar rock and the purple topaz metal were materials which transcendent mortal experts would kill to get their hands on. With them, they could forge top-notch weapons. However, these superior materials did little to alleviate the grimness on Zhang Xian's face. While better materials did allow for the forging of better weapons, the criterion to clearing the examination was rising at an even faster pace. To clear the 5-star blacksmith examination, he would have to smith a spirit intermediate tier weapon. It was impossible to smith a weapon of that tier with just good materials in hand. More importantly, one had to wield incredible control over the metals and ores and command an extremely high understanding of the quenching process. Otherwise, the slightest mistake made could result in the wastage of these precious materials. Hoo. Zhang Xian's hands went through the various metals and ores nimbly, synthesizing them together one by one. Unlike previous times, he was working with the metals and ores in the furnace this time around. As such, he had to regulate the temperature in the furnace through his Jinqi simultaneously. Each metal and ore had its own melting point. In order to create a spirit intermediate tier weapon, each material had to be processed carefully to bring out the finest properties within it in the resulting alloy, so the temperature had to be carefully regulated in the synthesis phase. Soon, just as Zhang Xian's Jinqi was just about to be completely depleted, he finally finished synthesizing the last ore into the alloy. Exhaling deeply, Zhang Xian threw the metal lump into the water trough by the side. Quench. Tzzzzz. A dense layer of mist formed around the water trough, concealing it from sight. Zhang Xian activated his eye of insight to keep a close eye on even the most trivial of changes in the metal lump, and as its quality finally reached its peak, he quickly took it out. Based on his experience in the previous examinations, he learned that it was easier for him to grasp the condition of the quenching process through his eye of insight, thus further enhancing the quality of the final product. Test. Once again, Zhang Xian placed the metal lump on the grading pedestal. Wang. A mechanical voice announced, "The examinee has managed to smith a spirit intermediate tier weapon. Congratulations, you have passed the 5-star blacksmith examination." "I've passed the examination." Seeing that it was a success, Zhang Xian's body finally gave into exhaustion, and he fell weakly onto the ground. Even though he had skipped the hammering stage, it was still tough work controlling the flames in the furnace with his Jinqi. At this point, his Jinqi was nearly completely depleted. It was fortunately that he had still succeeded eventually. "I should heal up first." Sitting on the ground, Zhang Xian flicked his wrist, and a jade box appeared in his hands. Opening the jade box, he immediately felt a gush of incredibly pure spiritual energy blowing at him. It felt as if small needles were pricking his skin, creating a tingling sensation. A translucent stone sat inside the box. This was Zhang Xian's first time using a high-tier spirit stone. Those whose cultivation was too low would be unable to assimilate the pure spiritual energy within a high-tier spirit stones into their body. Even if they could absorb it, the spiritual energy would still leak from the minuscule pores in their meridians. The meridians within the human body was similar to a sandpit in some ways. There were many fine pores in them such that while thick and viscous mud could flow through it, pure water would usually seep right through those pores, resulting in immense wastage. In this analogy, the pure water would be referring to the concentrated spiritual energy within a high-tier spirit stone. Spiritual energy, in its purest form, was extremely fine, to the point that it could easily seep through the smallest openings. Even if an ordinary human were to try to absorb the spiritual energy within a high-tier spirit stone, they wouldn't be able to retain the slightest bit of it in their body. Only upon reaching transcendent mortal 9 Dan chrysalis realm would the openings in one's body be sealed like a cocoon, forming a seamless body. Only then would one be able to absorb the spiritual energy within a high-tier spirit stone to strive for greater heights. Zhang Xian was currently only at Cosmos Bridge realm, 3 realms away from reaching Chrysalis realm. Typically speaking, even if he had a high-tier spirit stone in his possession, he shouldn't be able to use it. However, having cultivated Heaven's Path Shinchi, his body had already been reformed by it, granting him a physical body far stronger than other cultivators. On top of that, he had also reached the second incandescence of the quintuple incandescence golden body. This granted him enhanced control over his body, allowing him to seal his pores to retain the fine spiritual energy from the high-tier spirit stone within his body. Gu 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 gu. As the pure spiritual energy circulated in Zhang Xian's body as per the Heaven's Path divine art, it was swiftly converted into Zhenqi before being deposited in his dantian. His depleted dantian swiftly filled up, reaching full capacity within 30 minutes. As expected of a high-tier spirit stone, I was able to recover swiftly. Zhang Xian stood up and did some stretches. If it had been a middle-tier spirit stone or a spirit-gathering formation, it would have taken at least several hours for his Zhenqi to fully recover. However, through absorbing the spiritual energy in a high-tier spirit stone via the Heaven's Path divine art, he was able to recover within just 30 minutes. This was a pace comparable to most pills forged specially for recovering one's Zhenqi. I still have another hour to go. Zhang Xian thought in delight as he returned the high-tier spirit stone to his storage ring. With an hour left, perhaps he might have enough time to challenge the 6-star blacksmith examination. While his current cultivation was still a little too low, the depth of his comprehension in smithing was superior to most 6-star pinnacle blacksmiths. If he could pass the 6-star blacksmith examination as well, he would be spared from spending even more academic credits here. Based on what he had seen and heard so far, he could tell that academic credits were extremely difficult to earn. There would surely be many places where he would require them in the future, so it was best for him to save as much as possible for the time being. Challenging the 6-star blacksmith examination is a little beyond my current cultivation at the moment. If I want to clear the examination, I won't be able to skip the forging phase anymore. The reason Zhang Xian had been able to clear all of the previous examinations was because of the superior quality of the alloy he had created. As such, even though the weapons he had smithied so far were just mere lumps of steel, they were still able to reach the required grade. However, in the 6-star examination, he would have to handle ores and metals which were beyond his current cultivation, and this meant that he wouldn't be able to process them as freely as he had all along. Due to that, it was unlikely that he would be able to clear the examination based on the quality of the alloy in itself. In other words, if he wanted to clear the examination, he would have to forge the weapon. However, he had no experience with hammering whatsoever. If he were to start practicing now, would he still be able to make it in time? Chapter 744, Attempting the 6-star blacksmith examination, I won't be able to make it in time. Hammering, just like pill forging, was a hands-on skill which could only be mastered through countless years of practice. Even with the library of Heaven's Path guiding him along, it would still be impossible for him to master the skill in time with only an hour left on the clock. Just as Zhang Xian was distressed as to what he should do next, a thought suddenly flashed across his mind, and his eyes lit up in excitement. Wait! Even though I can't forge a sword or those of that sort, I can turn the iron lump into a hammer. That should be much easier than other weapons. There were many intricacies behind swords and sabers which made them extremely difficult to forge them, but that shouldn't be the case for hammers. With just a few hits on the metal lump, he should be able to create a hammer easily. Alright, it's decided then. With a smile on his lips, Zhang Xian shouted, I request to challenge the 6-star blacksmith examination. Wang. The sight before Zhang Xian changed once more, turning into an even larger hall. Many ores and metals that would have been difficult to find in real life appeared before him. After some contemplation, Zhang Xian picked out a few dozen of them and brought them to the furnace. Xiong xiong. Tossing the ores and metals into the furnace, Zhang Xian began with his smithing. Meanwhile, Yuan Hong and a group of master teachers were standing outside the ocean of weapons, waiting for the results of the examination. After all that had happened, it was already nearing midnight. However, it didn't seem like anyone had the intention to leave. That Zhang Xian fellow had caused such a huge mess in the blacksmith school, but not only did vice school head Yuan not punish him, he even escorted him to the ocean of weapons for him to take the blacksmith examination. Everyone was curious to see what kind of legendary figure Zhang Xian was for a 6-star pinnacle blacksmith to treat him with such respect. How far do you think he can advance in the ocean of weapons? Do you even need to ask? With just 4 hours on the clock, he will only be able to clear the 1-star examination. Even if he is a talented blacksmith who is capable of producing weapons at an unprecedented speed, he'll only be able to clear the 2-star examination at the maximum. Anything beyond that is physically impossible. Indeed. Just take the forging process for example. In order to hammer the alloy into the perfect shape, one would have to spend at least an hour or 2 on it. Even seasoned blacksmiths wouldn't be able to go any faster than that. Everyone muttered with hushed voices. Since that fellow declared that he would be challenging the 5-star blacksmith examination, he should possess the ability to smith a spirit intermediate tier weapon at the minimum. However, due to the time limit within the ocean of weapons, it would be difficult for him to reach 2-star. Anything further than that would be plain impossible. As such, there was no one here who really thought that he would be able to clear the 5-star blacksmith examination today. Nevertheless, for a person who had never challenged the blacksmith examination before, clearing 2 stars simultaneously was still an incredible feat. Just as everyone was waiting patiently for the results from the ocean of weapons, footsteps suddenly sounded. Turning their heads over, everyone saw a few elders walking over. Look, the school head is here. No, it isn't just the school head. The other vice school heads as well. Why are they all here? They probably heard about the matter here and came over to take a look. The one who was leading the group was the head of the blacksmith school, one of the 10 great master teachers, Zhao Bingxiu. There were 3 elders walking behind him, and they were the remaining 3 vice school heads. After conducting a meridian and bone cleansing for Luo Chi-Chi and the others, they decided to head over here to see if the legendary student would be able to clear the 5-star blacksmith examination. School head. As if having guessed that the school head would come, Yuan Hong didn't seem surprised in the least. He clasped his fist and greeted the other party. How is it? Has he begun the 5-star blacksmith examination yet? Judging from the current time, he should be done soon. Zhao Bingxiu asked with a smile. 5-star blacksmith examination. This. Yuan Hong muttered awkwardly. Bewildered by Yuan Hong's reaction to his words, Zhao Bingxiu asked doubtfully, what's wrong? Isn't it Zhang Shi who is undergoing the examination inside at the moment? It's indeed him who is inside, but it appears that Zhang Shi has never taken a blacksmith examination before, so he is currently challenging the 1-star examination, Yuan Hong replied. He has never taken any blacksmith examination before? Zhao Bingxiu exclaimed. The other 3 vice school heads behind him were also stunned by the revelation. Since that fellow had never taken the 1-star examination before, why in the name of Kong Shi was he attempting to challenge the 5-star examination? Yes. Yuan Hong nodded. His intention before entering the ocean of weapons seemed to be to challenge the 2-star examination after clearing the 1-star examination. I wonder if he will be able to succeed. Before entering the ocean of weapons, that fellow had asked if he could challenge the subsequent examinations as well, so he was probably preparing to do so. It would be difficult, but that fellow might just be able to pull it off. Are you curious? Actually, we can just take a peek at it. Zhang Bingshu chuckled. Take a peek. But the ocean of weapons is still in operation, how do we take a look? Yuan Hong was bewildered. By right, as long as the ocean of weapons was still in operation, it was impossible to know the results of the test inside. Otherwise, he wouldn't be waiting here. While it's indeed impossible to see the results within the ocean of weapons, we can always try to apply for the emblem for him. If the emblem appears, it will mean that he has cleared the one-star examination. Zhao Bingshu said as he stroked his beard. That. Indeed. Why didn't I think of that? Yuan Hong slapped his thigh and chuckled. The emblem would be dispatched outside after one cleared the examination in the ocean of weapons. As long as one had cleared the examination inside, the system would distribute an emblem when an application was sent in. It was impossible to know the results of the blacksmith examination directly since Zhang Xian wasn't out yet, but they could use this method to know how far he was into the examination. If they were to succeed in applying for the one-star emblem, it would mean that he had already cleared the one-star examination and was in the midst of challenging the two-star examination. Such a simple matter, but to think that it had slipped his mind. All right, I shall give it a try. Yuan Hong stepped forward, placed his hand on a button on the gigantic doors of the ocean of weapons, and pressed it lightly. There was a momentary burst of light before an emblem fell from an aperture below the button. Oh. He cleared the one-star examination. Yuan Hong muttered as he grabbed the falling emblem. It was Zhang Xian's one-star blacksmith emblem. Since it was dispatched, it could only mean that Zhang Xian had cleared the one-star examination. Since he has cleared the one-star examination, he should probably be in the midst of the two-star examination at the moment. Zhao Bingshu nodded. It is about to be 4 hours soon. Let me give it a try to see if he has passed the two-star examination yet. Yuan Hong pondered for a moment before placing his palm back on the button. Wang! Another burst of light, and an emblem fell from the aperture once more. This is the two-star emblem. He has cleared the two-star examination as well. Yuan Hong froze for an instant before hurriedly reaching out to grab the falling emblem. In his view, clearing an examination within 4 hours was already extremely difficult in itself. Even if there was some spare time after clearing the one-star examination, the chances were that the examinee would already be exhausted by then, making it nearly impossible to clear the next one. Yet, this fellow actually cleared 2 examinations consecutively. Was this for real? He's cleared the two-star examination. Zhao Bingshu was taken aback as well. He walked up to Yuan Hong, took the emblem from him, and examined it carefully. Inscribed on it was Zhang Xian's name. There was no doubt about it, he had cleared the two-star examination within the 4-hour limit. But if he has cleared the two-star examination, why isn't he out yet? Could it be that he is trying for the 3-star examination? Yuan Hong widened his eyes at that thought. If Zhang Xian wasn't out after clearing the 2-star examination, did that mean that he was attempting the subsequent 3-star examination? To still have the strength to attempt subsequent examinations after clearing the 2-star examination. What was that fellow made of? That should be the case. However, given the limited amount of time, it is impossible for him to clear the 3-star examination. Yuan Hong shook his head. As a 6-star pinnacle blacksmith, he knew how difficult smithing was. Even with his current skills, he would only be able to smith phantom low-tier weapons within 4 hours at best. Anything more than that was impossible. To clear the 1-star and 2-star examination, Zhang Xian would have to smith at least 2 weapons. However, no matter how proficient he was in smithing, he couldn't possibly be faster than a 6-star pinnacle blacksmith. As such, how could he possibly be able to smith the 3rd weapon? Let's just try giving it a press. Zhao Bingshu interjected as he walked up to the door and pressed on the button. Wang! Yet another flash of light and emblem. This, the 3-star emblem. Not only did Yuan Hong leap in shock, even Zhao Bingshu was stunned. To smith 3 weapons within 4 hours, advancing from an apprentice to a 3-star blacksmith. This speed was insane. Could it be possible that? The duo glanced at one another, only to see the shock in each other's eyes. Unable to stand the curiosity any longer, Yuan Hong pressed the button once more. Voila! Again, another flash of light and another emblem. Yuan Hong swallowed his saliva and uttered hoarsely, 4-star. He is actually trying to clear up to the 5-star blacksmith examination within 4 hours. When that fellow said that he would challenge the 5-star blacksmith examination, Yuan Hong had regarded it as nothing more than a joke. After all, how could anyone advance from an apprentice to a 5-star blacksmith within a single day? But who could have thought that he would actually succeed? Since the 4-star emblem had appeared, it could only mean that he was currently attempting for the 5-star blacksmith examination. To smith 4 weapons within 4 hours, and not to mention, all 4 of them had to reach the required quality in order to clear the examination. How in the world was that fellow doing it? Xiong Bing, who had been watching the scene, couldn't help but ask, do you think that it's possible that he might have cleared the 5-star examination? That's impossible. Hearing those words, Yuan Hong immediately shook his head in denial. If he had cleared the 5-star examination, he would have been out by now. Why would he still be inside? But despite the words Yuan Hong was speaking, his hands still stretched out to press that button once again. Voila! And yet again, another emblem fell from the aperture. Grabbing it hurriedly, Yuan Hong rubbed his eyes and stared at the name and rank inscribed on the emblem, and his body began shaking intensely. A 5-star emblem. Sheiqi has even cleared the 5-star blacksmith examination as well. TTT then, what examination is he taking at the moment? Yuan Hong felt as if everything he had known about the world was crumbling before his eyes, and tears threatened to spill down his cheeks. If they could apply for the 5-star emblem but that fellow wasn't out yet, didn't that mean that the fellow was attempting the 6-star blacksmith examination? But how could that be possible? Even if he had sufficient time to attempt it, his cultivation was too low to clear the examination. In order to become a 6-star blacksmith, one must be able to smith a spirit pinnacle weapon at the minimum, and in order to do so, the minimum cultivation one must possess was Transcendent Mortal 9-Dan Chrysalis Realm. This was a well-known fact amongst blacksmiths. Until one had achieved a seamless body at Transcendent Mortal 9-Dan Chrysalis Realm, the inadvertent leakage of Jinqi would result in imperfections in the smithing process, making it impossible to smith a spirit pinnacle weapon. For a weapon to reach spirit pinnacle, it had to be rich in spirit and nearly impeccable. If one couldn't even control one's body perfectly, how could one possibly forge such a weapon? Wang! In the midst of his shock, Yuan Hong subconsciously reached out to press the button once more, and with a flash of light, another emblem fell from the aperture again. 6-star. As if statues, everyone froze in place, and silence loomed before the ocean of weapons. Chapter 745. Accepting you as my teacher's disciple. Usually in the 4-hour time frame in the ocean of weapons, one would only be able to raise one's rank up by a single star. Yet, in a single seating, 6 emblems had been distributed by the ocean of weapons. This meant that, in a single breath, he cleared the examination from 1 star all the way to 6-star, and it was all a success. For a freshman with a Cosmos Bridge Realm cultivation to actually clear the 6-star blacksmith examination, everyone couldn't help but tremble out of sheer agitation and shock. This was especially so for the female receptionist, Li Xian. Her eyes rolled up, and she nearly fainted on the spot. Through her conversation with him, she could tell that he possessed minimal knowledge of the blacksmith school at best. And yet, such a person actually cleared the 6-star blacksmith examination. She actually got impatient with a person who possessed the capability of a 6-star blacksmith. As such a thought flashed through her mind, she began shaking in fear. If there was a hole in the ground at this moment, she would dive in without any hesitation. On the other hand, Zhao Bingxiu, Yuan Hong, and the other vice school heads also nearly blacked out. To forge 6 weapons within 4 hours to progress from a mere apprentice to a 6-star blacksmith. Was he still a human? School head, do you think that you would be able to do it as well? Yuan Hong couldn't help but ask with his quivering lips. School head Zhao boasted the greatest capability in smithing among them, and it was by a wide margin at that. If there was any one of them who could match that achievement, it would only be school head Zhao. After a moment of hesitation, Zhao Bingxiu eventually shook his head. I couldn't do it either. Despite his superior smithing speed, it was impossible for him to complete 6 weapons within 6 hours. In truth, the smithing of lower-grade weapons didn't necessarily take less time than higher-quality weapons. It was true that lower-quality materials were easier to process, making the synthesis phase much easier. However, the forging phase was still likely to be extremely time-consuming. While the material would be easier to shape, special care had to be taken in order to ensure that the weapon didn't snap or deform. As such, the forging of the weapon still had to be done step by step. In such a case, his incredible strength as a saint didn't provide him much of an advantage. If he were to start from 1 star, 3-star would probably be his limit. Yet, that fellow actually reached 6-star in a single breath. Was this feat still humanly possible? Swallowing a mouthful of saliva, Yuan Hong asked hesitantly, then, the matter regarding accepting him as your disciple. That. A crimson tinge swiftly enveloped Zhao Bingxiu's face as he found himself at a loss for words. He was still thinking a moment ago that he would accept the other party as his student and impart the essence of his comprehension of smithing to him, thus creating a beautiful legend for the blacksmith school. But, if that fellow was able to accomplish what he wasn't able to, he would only be humiliating himself if he were to ask the other party to be his student. Jiya. While the both of them were stuck in a dilemma and the others were frozen in shock, the ocean of weapons doors abruptly opened, and the silhouette of a young man came into sight. At this moment, fatigue was written all over Zhang Xian's face, and his movements were sluggish. Even though he had recovered some of his strength inside through absorbing the spiritual energy in the high-tier spirit stone, he had still overexerted himself in the 6-star blacksmith examination. Ultimately, his current cultivation was only at Cosmos Bridge Realm Pinnacle. Even with the enhancement from Heaven's Path Shinqi and Heaven's Path Golden Body, he was still pushed to his very limits. Thus, after clearing the examination, he had to rest for a moment before he could muster the strength to stand up and leave. Nevertheless, it was fortunate that he had cleared the examination. At the current moment, he was already a quasi-6-star blacksmith. In the upper 9 paths occupations, unless special exceptions are given from the headquarters, as long as one's cultivation has yet to reach the required level, it could only be considered as a quasi-rank. Zhang Shi. Yuan Hong walked over with admiration evident on his face. If he was still a little conflicted a moment ago due to the destruction of the various amenities, at this moment, he finally realized how wise the school head's decision was. To be able to pass the 6-star blacksmith examination with just a cultivation of Cosmos Bridge Realm, such talent had never been seen in the blacksmith school's thousands of years of history. Given sufficient time, he would surely become yet another Wu Yangzi of Hongyuan Empire. With such a figure in the blacksmith school, the reputation of the school would soar, and more talents would opt to join their ranks as well. Here is your emblem. Yuan Hong stepped forward and passed Zhang Xian his quasi-6-star emblem. Thank you. Taking the emblem, Zhang Xian nodded. At this moment, another elder with a bright smile on his face stepped forward. Zhang Shi, I am Zhao Bingxiu. Zhao Bingxiu. Zhang Xian glanced at Yuan Hong doubtfully. This name sounded extremely foreign to him. He didn't know anyone who went by such a name. Looking at the puzzled expression on Zhang Xian's face, the master teachers in the area staggered. You came to the blacksmith school to challenge its examinations, but you don't know who the school head is? That's really enough of you. Li Xian could also feel tears pouring down her face. She'd thought that Zhang Xian was only ignorant of the rules of the academy, but it turned out that he was ignorant of everything. Yet, it was such an ignorant person who cleared the 6-star blacksmith examination, bringing the school head and vice school heads here just to meet him personally. On the other hand, she could only serve as a humble receptionist in the blacksmith school. Truly, how could the difference between two humans be so great? Knowing that the young man before him truly didn't know of the Zhao Bingshu's identity, Yuan Hong hurriedly explained, Zhao Shi is the head of the blacksmith school, one of the 10 great master teachers. Hearing those words, Zhang Xian clasped his fist and greeted him. Zhang Xian pays respect to school head Zhao. While he had successfully cleared the 6-star blacksmith examination, there was still a huge gap between him and the head of the blacksmith school and a member of the 10 great master teachers. It's okay, there's no need to stand on ceremony, Zhang Shi. It is heartening to see a man as young as you clear the 6-star blacksmith examination. Seeing the young man retaining his humility despite his astounding achievement, Zhao Bingshu nodded in commendation. Thank you for your polite words, I was just lucky. Zhang Xian quickly replied. With his current cultivation, it was extremely difficult for him to smith a spirit pinnacle weapon. If not for a fair bit of luck here and there, he would still be a 5-star blacksmith at this moment. Luck favors the diligent and capable. It is rare to see a person who can still remain level-headed in the face of success. I can see why Luo Qiqi and the others are in awe of you, Zhao Bingshu said as he stroked his beard. He was getting more and more fond of the young man before him. Too many times he had seen young geniuses with their heads in the skies due to just a few accomplishments here and there. On the other hand, the young man didn't allow his success to go to his head. It seemed like his smithing ability wasn't just the only aspect of him that was admirable, his mental fortitude was incredible as well. If he could accept such a genius as his disciple, his reputation would surely soar. However, considering that the other party's skills were not beneath his, it would be unlikely for the other party to accept it. After a moment of hesitation, Zhao Bingshu smiled and said, Zhang Shi, your talent in smithing is unmatched by any in the younger generation. However, if you wish to reach greater heights, you must have someone to guide and correct you. With my shallow grasp of smithing, I dare not ask you to become my student. However, if you wish, in the stead of my teacher, I hope to accept you as his student. Accept me as your teacher's student. Zhang Xian was taken aback. That's right. My teacher is a 7-star master teacher in Qingyuan conferred empire, and he possesses great prestige there. I'm sure he would be more than glad to have a talented blacksmith like you as his student. Zhao Bingshu replied. School head Zhao will accept that fellow as his teacher's student in place of his teacher. If that were to happen, does that mean that Zhang Shi would be school head Zhao's junior? To become the junior of one of the 10 great master teachers, the student of a 7-star blacksmith. Regardless of which title it is, there will be no one who will dare to stand in his way in the academy. This is amazing. Hearing the conversation between the duo, an uproar broke out amidst the master teachers in the area. Even Yuan Hong had nearly fell to the ground from shock. He already found it shocking to hear of school head Zhao's intentions to take Zhang Shi in as his student, but for him to become his junior instead. This was madness. If Zhang Shi were to accept that offer, wouldn't that mean that he would be a peer to them? For a grade 1 student who hadn't even received his student token yet to become the school head's junior. Yuan Hong, Xiong Bing, and the others glanced at one another with bulging eyes. But as insane as this matter sounded, Zhang Shi had already shown that he was qualified for that. To advance from an apprentice to 6-star in a single breath. This had never ever been done before, and this record would likely remain unbroken for ages to come. Perhaps the unfathomable sage clans in the conferred empires might be capable of such a feat, but one thing was for sure, this feat was beyond everyone in the Master-Teacher Academy. Not expecting that there would be another person who would attempt to take him in as his student once more in the same day, this time in the stead of his teacher, Zhang Xian sighed deeply for a moment before shaking his head. I am truly apologetic, but I already have a teacher named Yang Xian. For the time being, I don't intend to acknowledge any teachers. If Zhang Xian were to accept the other party's offer, he might find several restrictions imposed on him. At the same time, he could easily accumulate any required knowledge by reading through books. There was no need for him to learn from another. He rejected the offer. That was an opportunity to become school head Zhao's junior. The world has gone mad, truly mad. An opportunity to become the student of the school head is something that countless have dreamed of, and yet he rejected an offer to become his junior. Slap me, I want to see if I am dreaming. Rejecting an offer to become a student of a 7-star master teacher, what else does he want? Everyone became petrified upon hearing that rejection. Countless here had laughed heartily when granted the opportunity of becoming school head Zhao's student, only to wake up and realize in dejection that it was just a dream. Yet, that fellow wasn't even willing to become school head Zhao's junior. Why don't you just ascend to the heavens? At this moment, Luo Yan's body was trembling in agitation, and he nearly fell to the ground weakly. He had sneaked out from his quarters, and it was only after seeing this scene that he realized why his teacher's attitude would change so abruptly. A junior of one of the 10 great master teachers. Just this title itself was deserving of Yuan Hong's respect. But what that left him tugging his hair in frenzy was that fellow rejected that offer. Screw that. Big brother, let's negotiate about this matter. Why don't we switch places, or rather, it's fine if I can become your disciple too. You aren't willing. Zhao Bingxiu was stupefied as well. He had already gone this far, accepting that fellow as his teacher's disciple out of fear that he wouldn't be willing to become his student, but who could have known that he would be disagreeable to that as well? Don't you know that a formidable teacher means strong backing as well? Do you understand the kind of privileges and authority you will gain the academy due to that? School head Zhao, thank you for your high appraisal of me. Zhang Xian bowed. He had an indifferent expression on his face, but the truth was that his heart was bleeding at this moment. He had already crafted Yang Shi as an unparalleled expert of the world. After all that had been said and done, he had little choice but to go on with his lie. If he were to take another as his teacher so easily, what would that say about Yang Shi? How could he convince others that Yang Shi was at least an 8-star master teacher when his direct disciple would take even a 7-star master teacher as his teacher? Arg, he would have no choice but to swallow the bitter fruit he had sowed. I guess I was being a little too hasty. Seeing the other party's determined attitude, Zhao Bingxiu sighed deeply. Pardon me for my ignorance, but may I know who Yang Shi is? Since Zhang Shi could even reject the opportunity to become a student of a 7-star master teacher, it could only mean to say that Yang Shi was a formidable master teacher himself. But if that was the case, why hadn't he heard of the other party before? My teacher seeks a carefree life wandering the lands, not wanting to be tied down by fame. As such, there are very few who know of his name. Zhang Xian chuckled. After a moment of pondering, Zhao Bingxiu clasped his fist. I am interested in paying respect to the master teacher who is capable of grooming such an outstanding student. May I trouble Zhang Shi to extend my regards to him? You wish to meet my teacher? Zhang Xian froze. Indeed. You are an incredible genius, and I think that it's a pity if we simply leave your talent for smithing bee. It's normal for a master teacher to have several teachers in his lifetime, and even Kong Shi himself acknowledged quite a few people as his teacher, Tan Shi, Li Shi. Thus, I wish to meet Yang Shi and discuss this matter with him. If we just impart the art of smithing to you, there shouldn't be a conflict of interest. Zhao Bingxiu said. Chapter 746, Zhang Xian's Flaw, Ah. Zhang Xian scratched his head. It seemed like the other party was truly determined to have him become his junior. However, despite the various benefits that could come from the opportunity, he still thought that it was better for him to turn down the deal. The privileges would come with a set of responsibilities, and he wasn't willing to bear them. Since Yang Shi is also one of our own, surely it should be fine for us to just meet? Zhao Bingshu stroked his beard. He was indeed interested in meeting the teacher behind such an outstanding student. The truth is that my teacher has no fixed lodging, so I don't know where he is at the moment either. However, I'll make sure to relay your intentions to him the next time I meet him, said Zhang Xian with a conflicted expression. What the heck is this? All I wanted to do was to read my books patiently, take all of the required examinations, and leave dashingly. Who could have known that everyone I met would be so intent on taking me as their student or their junior? Do I look like an easy man? Seems like it's about time to have Yang Shi make an appearance. Otherwise, if the 10 great master teachers visit me one after another, how can I read my books in peace? I want to keep a low profile, you know. Alright, that's a promise then. Zhao Bingshu chuckled. School head Zhao and the other vice school heads, I have overexerted myself in the 6-star blacksmith examination, so I would like to return to my residence to rest. I'll be taking my leave now. Fearing that Zhao Bingshu would continue asking him about Yang Shi's affairs and put him on the spot, Zhang Xian clasped his fist. Right, you must be drained by now. You should quickly return and have a good rest. It must be exhausting to forge 6 weapons in 4 hours. Let's talk tomorrow then. It was only after hearing those words that it struck Zhao Bingshu, Yuan Hong, and the others that the young man before them had just finished forging 6 weapons. In a moment of agitation, it had slipped their minds. It was indeed rude of them to keep the other party with them when he was already on the verge of collapsing. Thank you. Hearing their agreement, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. However, just as he was about to leave, Zhao Bingshu's voice sounded once more. Since you have just joined the academy, you must be staying at the shared dormitory at the moment. Here is my personal token. Get yourself a residence in the elite sector with this. This will make it more convenient for us to meet and talk. As he said those words, school head Zhao took out a token similar to the one Elder Mo had given him previously and proffered it to Zhang Xian. Back at the school head's office, Yuan Hong had only spoken about how Zhang Xian had destroyed the passageway of records. He didn't mention that the latter had Elder Mo's token in hand. Besides, Zhao Bingshu clearly intended this as a gesture of goodwill to get on the good side of this rising talent. Were it not for Yuan Hong's own personal token commanding less authority than the 10 great master teachers, he would have wanted to give his own to Zhang Shi as well. This. Zhang Xian blinked in surprise. Take it. My token should bring you some convenience in the academy. Zhao Bingshu nodded, indicating that it was fine for him to accept the gift. Thank you, school head Zhao. At the other party's insistence, Zhang Xian accepted the token. He had already rejected the other party's offer once, so it would be disrespectful of him to turn down this gift as well. However, as the crowd saw the look of reluctance on Zhang Xian's face as he accepted Zhao Bingshu's token, their mouths twitched violently, and they nearly burst into tears. One must know that it would be difficult for an average student to even meet school head Zhao. School head Zhao had come personally to meet that fellow, and not only did he reject the offer to become his junior, he was even unwilling to accept the token. Where did this freak come from? Did he know how many of them wanted to pummel him to death right then because of that reluctance on his face? I'll be taking my leave then. Taking the token, Zhang Xian immediately turned around and left. Before long, he had already disappeared over the horizon. It sure is a huge pity. Watching as Zhang Xian's silhouette disappear, Zhao Bingshu shook his head. A pity? Yuan Hong asked, uncomprehending of Zhao Bingshu's words. Zhang Shi is an incredible genius. Despite his politeness, I can still see the pride in his eyes. It will be hard to win him over with material gains. It will be nigh impossible to retain him in the blacksmith school. Zhao Bingshu sighed. You're right. After a moment of contemplation, Yuan Hong nodded as well. That was an opportunity to become school head Zhao's junior, but he still rejected it without much hesitation. As such, what else could the blacksmith school offer him? Surely there wasn't anything as attractive as that. Let's just take a step at a time and see what we can do. In any case, make sure to treat him with respect and don't offend him, Zhao Bingshu said. After which, he turned his eyes to the ocean of weapons and said, Yuan Hong and Xiong Bing, follow me in. I am really interested to see how he managed to forge 6 weapons in 4 hours. Even Zhao Bingshu himself had to concede that it was impossible for him to forge 6 weapons and advance from an apprentice to a 6-star master teacher within 4 hours. How did a Cosmos Bridge Realm blacksmith accomplish a feat that was even beyond him? Yes. Yuan Hong and Xiong Bing nodded. In truth, they harbored the same doubts as well. Thus, the group pushed open the towering doors of the ocean of weapons and walked in. As the head of the blacksmith school, Zhao Bingshu wielded special privileges that allowed him to enter the ocean of weapons even without using academic credits. Let's look at the recordings of the examination. Zhao Bingshu said as he flicked his finger. Wang. The ocean of weapons whirred into action, and Zhang Xian's figure from a moment ago, when he was still taking the examination, appeared before the group's eyes. There was a special installation in the ocean of weapons that allowed it to record the happenings in the examinations and replay it, so that others could study and learn from outstanding examinees. Who? Under the gazes of the group, Zhang Xian casually grabbed a couple of ores and metals and threw it into the furnace. After which, he retrieved them and synthesized them together before tossing it into the quenching fluid straight. This. He went straight into quenching without forging the weapon. Everyone froze in shock. However, forging is indeed the most time-consuming phase in the smithing of a weapon. He could indeed save himself a lot of time through skipping it. This is a brilliant idea. Why didn't I think of it? Zhao Bingshu's eyes glowed in excitement as he slapped his thigh. Of the 3 phases of smithing, the most arduous and complicated procedure was, without doubt, hammering the ingot into its intended shape. If one could skip this step, one could indeed save a fair bit of time. However, could the product of this smithing still be considered a weapon? Soon, they saw Zhang Xian retrieving a metal lump from the quenching fluid before placing it on the grading pedestal. After which, he cleared the examination. To think that a mere alloy which hasn't undergone hammering yet could reach phantom low tier. Incredible. Xiong Bing nodded in commendation. It was not without reason that weapons were called creations under 1,000 hammerings. The purpose of the forging phase wasn't just to shape the weapon but to strike out the impurities in the weapon and balance out the alloy as well, thus enhancing its quality. Yet, without a single hammering, that fellow was able to make a mere metal lump achieve the quality worthy of being deemed as a weapon. Even as 6-star pinnacle blacksmiths, none of them were capable of doing the same. To craft such a perfect alloy would require a thorough understanding of every single property of the ores and metal, so as to determine the temperature of the furnace, the timing of the synthesis, and deduce the reaction from the synthesis. On top of that, he has to work on the metals and ores simultaneously in the synthesis process while controlling the heat in the furnace through his shinchi. To be able to multitask that well, it could only mean that he has a powerful soul as well. Furthermore, to be able to remain unfazed at such proximity to the furnace, and even grab the searing alloy barehanded. How powerful must his physical body be? His movements are fluid, devoid of the slightest hesitation. This goes to say that he possesses mental fortitude, allowing him to move confidently without allowing doubt to hinder him. The longer they watched, the more astonished the group became. Synthesizing the metals and ores into an alloy and quenching it straight after, they could easily do the same as well. However, it was a different question whether they would be able to clear the examination with what they created. In fact, even the legendary Grandmaster blacksmith, Wu Yangzi, didn't seem to be capable of this feat. Was that fellow really an inheritor of Wu Yangzi's heritage and not his teacher? Soon, they reached the 6-star blacksmith examination simulation. With each flick of a finger, a melodious metallic ring sounded. Before long, a massive metal hammer appeared before Zhang Xian. Is this really a weapon forged by a blacksmith? Judging by how skillful that young man was in his hammering, they'd thought that the end product would astound them, just as he had done many times before. Who would have thought that his work would turn out to be so hideous? Are you sure that it is a metal hammer and not a steel tower? Everyone glanced at one another speechlessly. After watching the entire examination, Zhao Bingxiu couldn't help but remark, "It seems like Zhang Shi does possess great talent, but his forging skills are still a little lacking." Lacking is an understatement. It is as if he has never learnt hammering before. Yuan Hong shook his head. Honestly speaking, not even an apprentice blacksmith would create a hammer as terrible as his. Flame control, synthesis, quenching. All of these, Zhang Shi had perfect grasp over. Yet, why would he simply fail so utterly in the hammering phase? One must know that this was actually the simplest phase of the entire smithing process. It could easily be mastered through repetition. But this works to our advantage as well. We can use this opportunity to teach him and rally him to our blacksmith school. Zhao Bingxiu smiled. He was still thinking about how he could win Zhang Xian over and tie him down to the blacksmith school when this opportunity appeared before him. With this, he could step forward and guide the other party along, thus making him indebted to the blacksmith school. Yes, that's a good idea. The other vice school heads also nodded in agreement as well. Their only fear was that Zhang Xian would have no flaws at all. As long as he had a flaw, they could use it as an impetus to approach him and build a close relationship with him. Once he started learning from one of them, it would just be a matter of time before he was tied down to their ship. On the other hand, after returning to his residence in the elite sector, fatigue finally set into Zhang Xian's body, leaving him feeling weak throughout. While he did cut some corners in his work, it still hadn't been an easy feat for him to smith 6 weapons within 4 hours. His jinqi was depleted, and his spirit and soul were worn out. If not for his soul having broken the 10 meters bottleneck, he might have just collapsed in the midst of the examination. I didn't have a chance to examine it before, but it seems my soul has undergone a qualitative change after breaking the 10 meters bottleneck. After absorbing some spiritual energy from his high-tier spirit stone to recharge, Zhang Xian suddenly recalled a matter. Back in the chamber of earth flame, when his soul had successfully overcome the 10 meters bottleneck, he vividly felt some changes in his soul. However, with the chamber collapsing on him right afterward and the various troubles afterward, he hadn't had the opportunity to check on it yet. Since he had some time now, it would be good for him to see what was going on. His soul, physical body, and jinqi, these were the 3 factors that stood at the foundation of his strength. Through past experience, he'd learned that it was essential for him to maintain a perfect grasp of his condition so as to avoid any unfortunate mishaps. Activating the formation around him to block out any prying eyes, Zhang Xian sat on the ground and closed his eyes. His soul left his body. At this moment, his soul was as enormous as a giant. Even with his feet on the ground, his head could still easily reach the roof of the residence. Introspection. Zhang Xian activated the Eye of Insight to view the situation in his soul. What is this? How is this possible? Upon first glance, Zhang Xian suddenly froze, and shocked exclamations escaped from his mouth. Chapter 747, Return of the Innate Fetal Poison. Under the discerning gaze of the Eye of Insight, Zhang Xian could see a thin gray line floating amidst his massive soul. It resembled a parasite, leaving him with an ominous feeling within. This is the innate fetal poison. Zhang Xian narrowed his eyes. Even back when he was still in Tianxian Kingdom, he had already noticed the innate fetal poison in him. However, as he began to cultivate the Heaven's Path divine art, the poison was suppressed by the Heaven's Path Shinchi, thus crippling it for the time being. As time passed, he began to pay less and less heed to it. Based on his previous investigation, he should be able to resolve the problem by becoming a 9-star master teacher before the age of 30. Who could have known that the innate fetal poison would actually slip into his soul? He could suppress the innate fetal poison in his physical body through his Heaven's Path Shinchi, but how was he supposed to deal with it in his soul? Zhang Xian's face turned livid. A soul was the foundation of a human's consciousness. Its destruction would spell irreversible death for one. Zhang Xian was still previously harboring the thought of focusing on the cultivation of his soul such that even if he was unable to resolve his innate fetal poison, he could at least still live on as a soul. But from the looks of it, this idea was impossible now. Unknowingly, the treacherous poison had managed to seep into his soul. As his soul was too weak before, he wasn't able to perceive it. However, as his soul broke the 10 meters bottleneck and grew even stronger and more sensitive, he finally noticed that something was amiss. Or perhaps, has the innate fetal poison been in my soul from the very start? The innate fetal poison was planted in him back when he was nothing more than a fetus in his mother's womb. Given how vulnerable he was then, it shouldn't have been too difficult for it to spread from his body to his soul, or vice versa. However, considering how it had been some time since he'd become a soul oracle, it didn't seem quite possible for him to have never noticed the innate fetal poison in his soul all along. It was as if that congregation of innate fetal poison had been invisible to him all along. Or could it be that it was simply too weak for him to perceive then? If that was the case, could it mean that the innate fetal poison was leeching off his soul, growing along with it? What should I do? Will the innate fetal poison work up earlier if I continue cultivating my soul? Zhang Xian thought grimly. Without the Heaven's Path Shinchi, it would be difficult for him to suppress the innate fetal poison. If the poison in his soul were to trigger, he would be helpless before it. What the heck was this? The other protagonists that transcend to another world were either top-notch geniuses or given overpowered artifacts that allowed them to dominate the world. It was one thing for him to have been born with average talent, but he was even given such a gift from the world. What crime did he commit in his previous life to deserve this? While the soul of Heaven's Path was indeed powerful, it shared one common trait with the other souls: it was incapable of harnessing Shinchi, and this included the Heaven's Path Shinchi as well. Without the Heaven's Path Shinchi to suppress the innate fetal poison, it would be able to do as it pleased in his soul. In other words, his life and death hinged on the whim of that monstrosity. Unless I can find something to suppress it. If his Heaven's Path Shinchi couldn't help him suppress the innate fetal poison in his soul, he would just have to find something else that could. Otherwise, if that monstrosity were to get into a bad mood and wreak havoc, he might just die a premature death. It wouldn't do to simply bank his fate on luck. Soul Oracle is the occupation that specializes in the topic of souls. I have received Mo Huanqing's heritage, but there isn't any method for me to suppress the innate fetal poison in there. Furthermore, the heritage of soul oracles has been wiped out by the Master Teacher Pavilion, so it's unlikely that I'll be able to find a solution from there. Zhang Xian contemplated. If he wanted to find something to suppress the innate fetal poison in his soul, he would have to first find something compatible with his soul. To do so, he would first have to deepen his understanding regarding souls. However, with the heritage of the number one occupation specializing in the study of souls extinct, he could only try to find another substitute for it. Of the 10 schools in the Master Teacher Academy, the supporting occupations that can influence one's soul are painter, demonic tunist, and terpsichore. Painting can calm hearts and build conception, but it possesses no offensive capability whatsoever. On the other hand, demonic tunist and terpsichore can beguile hearts and destroy souls. Thus, I should focus on the latter two instead. The other supporting occupations such as beast tamer, blacksmith, celestial designer, and physicians had little regarding the study of souls. At this point, the only two occupations which could possibly help Zhang Xian were demonic tunist and terpsichore. Those two occupations specialized in the beguilement of souls, so they should have a sizable collection regarding the study of souls. I will pay those two schools a visit when dawn comes. Time waited for no one. Every day he waited meant an additional day where he could be killed by the innate fetal poison. However, it was already nearing midnight, so it was unlikely that their facilities would still be open. Thus, it would be better for him to head there after daybreak. Even though there was an event in the academy tomorrow, in which the teachers of the academy would accept students under their tutelage, it didn't make a difference to him whether he went there or not. After all, if he intended to seek a teacher, he would have already accepted Zhao Bingshu's offer to become his junior. It would be pointless for him to reject that offer and seek a normal teacher instead. Even if a student was left without a teacher at the end of the event, it wasn't the end of the world for him. For one, he could still attend public lessons. Besides, Zhang Xian's main goal for coming to the Master Teacher Academy was to access the collection of books in here. In view of that, it didn't matter whether he had the guidance of a teacher or not. I don't think I can sleep tonight. I guess I shall take a look at how Wang Ying and the others are doing. With the issue regarding the innate fetal poison weighing down his mind, it was unlikely that he would be able to rest. Since that was the case, he might as well take a look at how his students and butler were doing and provide them some guidance on their cultivation. Otherwise, they might find themselves lagging too far behind Yuan Tao, Zhao Ye, and Lu Chong. Thus, Zhang Xian stood up and walked out of his room. Turbid clouds shrouded the night sky, and not a single star or the moon was to be seen. Even on such a dark night, it would be too conspicuous for him to travel using the red dust heaven ascending steps, especially since there were sentries keeping a lookout for the aerial space in the academy given the presence of Saint Realm experts in the city. After a moment of hesitation, he decided to summon the great violet wing beast. There were quite a few students in the academy who bore the beast tamer occupation, so aerial spirit beasts were allowed to travel to and fro unrestricted grounds in the academy. Leaping onto the back of the aerial spirit beast, Zhang Xian flew out of the academy. Before heading to Leiyuan Peak, Sun Chang had already found a residence, and he had informed Zhang Xian of the address as well. After a couple minutes of flight, a small residence soon came into sight. This residence was only a few hundred meters square large, significantly smaller than the previous one they'd stayed in. Nevertheless, in Hongyuan City where every inch of ground was worth a fortune, it must have taken a huge deal of effort to find a residence of this size. Just as Zhang Xian was about to leap down from the great violet wing beast's back, he suddenly frowned. Eye of insight. With a sharp gaze, he surveyed his surroundings. Soon, he saw a few shadows hidden inconspicuously in the shadows around the residence, seemingly up to no good. They are all ethereal treading realm experts. While they had done a good job concealing their trail, they were still unable to fool the eye of insight. Zhang Xian could feel immense power lying dormant in their bodies, as if a crouching mighty dragon. Astonishingly, they were all transcendent mortal 8 Dan experts. Why would such experts be lurking around his residence? Could it be that they meant Sun Chang and the others harm? We have just arrived here, and Sun Chang and the others have nothing much of fortune on them either. How did they catch the eye of such experts? While ethereal treading realm cultivators weren't the top-tier power in Hongyuan City, they were definitely considered experts here. For so many experts to surround a small residence, what could they be up to? Surely Sun Chang and the others didn't have any possession on them that could attract their attention. Forget it, this is a good opportunity to try out my new strength. A glint flashed across Zhang Xian's eyes. At Leiyuan Peak, he had managed to advance his cultivation to Cosmos Bridge Realm Pinnacle, resulting in his Jinqi strength rising to 8 million ding. In the Chamber of Earth Flame, he had managed to achieve second incandescence in the quintuple incandescence golden body, thus enhancing his overall physical strength to 8 million ding as well. Factoring in the 3,200,000 ding of strength from his soul cultivation, the overall might he could harness added up to almost 20 million ding. This granted him the strength to fight with ethereal treading realm advanced stage experts on equal grounds. Since those fellows seem to be up to no good, there shouldn't be any trouble using them as punching bags. Who? With a leap, Zhang Xian descended from the back of the great violet-winged beast. Since the great violet-winged beast was maintaining a high altitude in the sky, the several men hidden in the shadows didn't seem to notice Zhang Xian. Zhang Xian drove his Jinqi and activated the red dust heaven ascending step. As if a light feather, he slowly drifted down amidst the cloak of the night sky. I should start from the weakest. There was a total of 4 men hidden in the area, and the weakest of them was at ethereal treading realm primary stage. Silently, as if an apparition, Zhang Xian's figure floated stealthily toward the masked man hidden behind an ancient tree. By cloaking his vitals with his Heaven's Path Jinqi, he was able to erase his presence such that not even a chrysalis realm expert would be able to notice him. He silently gathered his strength on his palm and pressed it against the masked man. The masked man behind the ancient tree felt an abrupt jolt on his back before immense might began gushing through his body, sealing every single one of his meridians. Put on. The next moment, he was already lying on the ground, unconscious. Oh. This isn't as difficult as I thought it would be. Zhang Xian muttered. It was just a day ago that he was still completely powerless before an ethereal treading realm expert, but at this moment, he could already incapacitate them without much effort. After knocking the first one out, he turned his gaze toward his second target and slowly made his way over. The target this time around was an ethereal treading realm intermediate stage expert. He was slightly warier, and Zhang Xian was discovered before he could make his way to him. Just as he was able to exclaim to warn his other comrades, he suddenly felt an extremely heavy pressure pushing on his soul, rendering him incapable of speech. It was an assault on his soul. While he was an ethereal treading realm expert, he was far weaker than Zhang Xian when it came to the prowess of their souls. As a result, he was paralyzed for half a second. It was a short moment, but a moment was all it took to overwhelm an opponent in a battle. Who? Executing the same palm strike, the second target was also knocked unconscious. Even at the point when his consciousness faded, he wasn't able to see the face of his assailant. It was easier for these two because they are weaker, but it probably won't so as smoothly for the remaining 2. After knocking out 2 of the 4 targets, Zhang Xian exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. In terms of absolute strength, the 2 he had knocked out were weaker than him. However, the remaining 2 were at ethereal treading realm advanced stage and pinnacle respectively, and this meant that both their cultivation and absolute strength were higher than his. As such, it wouldn't be easy for him to assault them and knock them out as easily as the other 2. It'll be troublesome if they band together upon noticing my presence. I should clear one of them as fast as I can first. While it would be difficult to strike out the remaining targets with a single strike, he should be able to overwhelm his opponent swiftly using the element of surprise as long as he attacked decisively. Thus, he pushed his foot powerfully against the ground. Who? With movements as swift as lightning, he rushed straight for the ethereal treading realm advanced stage masked man. Heaven's Path movement art. Zhang Xian's movements were so fast that one could only barely see a shadow flitting across the darkness. What? The huge gale raked up by the Heaven's Path movement art alarmed the remaining 2 targets. The ethereal treading realm advanced stage masked man whom Zhang Xian was aiming for narrowed his eyes, and cold sweat suddenly began trickling down his back. However, it was already too late for him to do anything. Just as he was about to flee, a fist was already heading straight for his solar plexus. Pang! This punch harnessed the great momentum of the Heaven's Path movement art and the immense strength of the Heaven's Path fist art, creating an overwhelming might that couldn't be opposed. Pooh! Before the masked man could react, he was already struck squarely by the fist. Fresh blood spewed from his mouth as he flew a dozen meters away, striking head first into a massive boulder before passing out. Chapter 748, Spirit Emporium, You Are Seeking Death, the final masked man howled. He didn't expect to be assaulted here, and his face turned livid. Clenching his jaw, he drove his jinchi, and the powerful aura of an ethereal treading realm pinnacle expert gushed from his body. Who? The masked man raised his hands, and his jinchi suddenly flooded the area. In an instant, the air around Zhang Xian grew viscous. There was an immense resistance against every single movement he made, resulting in a huge dip in his movement speed. His strength didn't pale too far in comparison to the other party, but due to the difference in their cultivation, and thus the comprehension of nature, his ability in utilizing jinchi was far beneath the other parties. In a battle, this would pose as a significant disadvantage. In other words, while he could stand toe-to-toe with an ethereal treading realm expert in a direct clash of strength, he was still severely handicapped in a proper battle. Break. But even so, Zhang Xian wouldn't allow himself to be defeated without any resistance. Gathering his strength, he abruptly kicked forward. Voila! Under the immense force nearing 20 million ding, the jinchi spatial lockdown shattered like a broken mirror. Who? Activating the Heaven's Path movement art once more, Zhang Xian charged right up to the masked man. Voila! A fist as tough as adamantium shot forth for the masked man. Humph! After the first clash, the masked man could already see that his opponent's cultivation was only at Cosmos Bridge Realm Pinnacle. While the other party might have raised his strength significantly through some unknown means, it was still a far way from reaching up to him, an ethereal treading realm pinnacle expert. There was no way he could lose to a Cosmos Bridge realm opponent. Gathering his jinchi in his arms, he struck back with a palm strike. Voila! His hand carried great might that seemed to be more than capable of collapsing mountains. Spirit High-Tier Battle Technique, Mountain Collapsing Palm. In a moment of daze, it felt as if the heaven and earth had dimmed in the face of this palm. Even if his opponent was another ethereal treading realm pinnacle expert, he was confident he could overpower the other party easily. This was the strongest battle technique he had up his sleeves. The bizarre means of the fellow before him had sent warning bells ringing in his head, so he decided to use his strongest technique right from the get-go. He thought that he would be able to send that fellow flying in an instant with this strike, incapacitating him. But who knew that before his palm could even reach, he would hear the other party's excited voice. A head-on confrontation. Great! Following which, the young man before him agilely dodged to his left. This. Upon seeing this maneuver, the masked man's soul nearly fled his body from fright. The other party's hand was headed right for where the Ming-men of his mountain collapsing palm was located. Every technique had its own flaws. This was something inevitable. However, as long as one were to move with sufficient speed, one could prevent one's opponent from exploiting one's weaknesses. As such, in a battle among experts, it was rare to see the striking of Ming-men. However, it was as if that fellow had known the flaws of his mountain collapsing palm from the very start, moving right into his blind spot to strike his Ming-men as soon as he began executing the technique. Putting aside how he knew the Ming-men of his technique, to be able to recognize it and react instantaneously, how deep of an understanding of the mountain collapsing palm must he possess? However, at this crucial moment, he had no time to process his shock at all. His rapidly twitching eyes saw the young man's finger leisurely reaching for the weakness in his technique, but due to the immense momentum from his offense, he couldn't move away at all. Pooh! It was just a light jab, but his body was immediately sent flying into his distance. His jinchi was sent into disarray, and fresh blood spurted from his mouth like a fountain. Eventually, he struck a tree and fell to the ground. That jab had precisely struck the center of his flow of jinchi, sending the jinchi in his body into a devastating rampage instantaneously, tearing apart his meridians and acupoints. Even if he were to recover from his injury, his cultivation was pretty much crippled at this point. Sensing the changes in his body, tears flowed down the masked man's face. He had practiced the mountain collapsing palm to a very high level, making it difficult for his opponent to notice the flaws in his technique. How in the world did that fellow find it and even strike it precisely without the slightest deviation? If only he'd known that such a situation would occur, he would have never used the mountain collapsing palm against that young fellow. After knocking out all 4 of them, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief and instructed, "All right, bring those fellows to me." Roar! Hearing the orders, the great violet-winged beast immediately got into action. "Young master, you're here." "Teacher." Sun Chang, Zhen Yang, Wang Ying, and the others rushed out upon hearing the ruckus outside, and they immediately saw Zhang Xian's silhouette beneath the night sky. The group walked into the residence, and after taking a seat, Zhang Xian asked with a frown, "Right, did you offend anyone in the capital or cause any trouble somewhere?" "Offend anyone? Cause trouble? We didn't." Sun Chang replied. "If you didn't do anything, why would 4 ethereal treading realm experts be lurking around the residence?" Zhang Xian questioned sternly. "For ethereal treading realm experts?" Upon hearing those words, Sun Chang immediately leaped in shock. At that moment, Putong, a stack of bodies, was suddenly tossed at the doorway of the main hall by the great violet-winged beast. "Take a look yourself." Zhang Xian pointed to the doorway. Sun Chang walked to the doorway and examined the faces of those masked men before shaking his head in confusion. "I don't recognize any of these men. If you don't know them, why would they be loitering around our residence?" However, what Zhang Xian faced was only the bewildered gazes of his students and butler. Thus, he sighed deeply and waved his hands. "Bring them in." Roar! The 4 men were lifted and dumped into the main hall. As they had been fighting in the dark previously, Zhang Xian didn't have an opportunity to examine the profile of his opponents. Under the illumination from the night illumination pearls in the room, he saw 4 middle-aged men, seemingly in their 40s. They had a dark skin tone and a large physique. "Who are you? Why are you lurking around this residence?" Zhang Xian turned to the ethereal treading realm pinnacle cultivator, the only one conscious of the 4, and harumphed. "We were just passing by this area, we didn't mean to alarm you," the other party replied. Passing by. Seeing how the other party was still trying to deny the matter, a sharp glint flashed across Zhang Xian's eyes as he waved his hands and instructed, "Kill them and toss their bodies outside the city." He was already in a bad mood, and that fellow still dared to play games with him. Courting death. Zhang Xian wasn't fond of bloodshed, but he didn't mind staining his hands with the blood of those who dared to threaten the lives of his students and butler. Roar! Hearing the command, the great violet-winged beast immediately nodded in excitement. With a deafening roar, its talons swiped right for the 4 men. If it were to land on them, their heads would surely explode on the spot. "Didi, don't kill me. I'll speak. I'll speak." The lack of hesitation from the young man before him in ordering for their deaths sent a cold chill down the man's spine. "I was only obeying orders from my master, I beg of you to spare my life." The man knew that he would never get an opportunity to speak again if he didn't speak now, so he immediately gave in. "Orders? Whose?" Zhang Xian asked. "The Spirit Emporium." The man replied. "Spirit Emporium?" Zhang Xian frowned. He had never heard of that place before, so why would the other party go after him? "You are from the Spirit Emporium?" Sun Chang froze for an instant before clasping his fist toward Zhang Xian. "Young master, the Spirit Emporium is a shop in Hongyuan City which deals with artifacts. Just today, I visited its storefront." "You visited the Spirit Emporium?" Zhang Xian asked questioningly. "Yes. After all, we are a little short on money at the moment. Thus, I thought of selling the treasures you have gathered from Huanyu Empire to tide us through this period, and after asking around, I eventually found the Spirit Emporium," Sun Chang explained. Back in Huanyu Empire's mystical treasure hall, he had acquired quite a few artifacts, but he hadn't found an opportunity to sell them so far. However, with their finances running low, Sun Chang had no choice but to sell those artifacts. Who would have thought that he would end up drawing eyes to their group? I see. After asking a few more questions, Zhang Xian soon got a clear grasp of the situation. Even though the Spirit Emporium appeared to be a proper business on the surface, it was in fact a black market headed by a dangerous organization. Through their official business, they were able to find potential targets which their members could rob from to earn easy bucks. Sun Cheng, Zhen Yang, and the others possessed weak cultivation, but they carried immense wealth with them. How could the Spirit Emporium possibly let such an easy target go? Thus, the Spirit Emporium dispatched these 4 men for them. The main role of these 4 men was to scout their targets to ensure that there were no experts in their midst. If the targets were within their capability, they would then conduct an attack and plunder their wealth. How dare they try to rob my students and butler? They must be tired of living. Zhang Xian's face darkened. They should already be thanking the gods that he hadn't brought destruction upon their organization yet, but to think that they would be so brazen as to lay their eyes on his students and butler instead. Zhang Xian turned to Sun Cheng and asked, "Where is the Spirit Emporium?" "It isn't too far from here. It should be a 10-minute journey on foot." Sun Cheng replied. "All right then. Make preparations, we'll pay them a visit at dawn." Zhang Xian commanded with narrowed eyes. If he hadn't come back on a whim, what would be awaiting him might very well be a river of blood and lifeless corpses. Zhen Yang and the others had accompanied him throughout his journey, and he had already regarded them as his kin. Those who dare to inflict harm on his kin must be prepared to face his devastating fury. If he couldn't even protect his students and butler, what was the use of him pursuing even greater power? Yes. Hearing the veiled fury behind the young master's words, Sun Cheng nodded. Having accompanied the young master from Tianxian Kingdom to here, he had gotten a clear grasp of the latter's personality. The young master was an easygoing person who was usually fine with anything. However, if anyone dared to threaten the safety of those around him, he would transform into a demon, destroying every single enemy in his way. Back then, when Lu Chong was mortally wounded by Ding Chong, Zhang Xian charged single-handedly into Xianyuan Kingdom to destroy its royal family, exacting vengeance for his student. Since the Spirit Emporium had dared to lay its hands on them, the same fate would likely befall them. Sun Cheng pointed to the 4 men in the center of the main hall and asked, "What do we do with these men?" Zhang Xian harumphed. "Cripple their cultivation and tie them up. We'll send them back as gifts at daylight." "Yes." Sun Cheng nodded before carrying the 4 men down with the great violet-winged beast. With their departure, only Zhang Xian, Zhen Yang, and his other students were left in the room. Zhang Xian had them execute a battle technique each and offered them some pointers on their techniques. Following which, he imparted them a simplified version of the Cosmos Bridge Realm Heaven's Path divine art before dismissing them so that they could spend the night slowly deciphering its essence. After which, he returned back to his room. Hula! With a flick of his wrist, a massive ape appeared before him. Byzantium Helios Beast. He had stuffed this fellow into the myriad anthive nest earlier this afternoon, and since there was some time now, he decided to take it out. "You. What do you want to do?" The Byzantium Helios beast had severe wounds inflicted all over its body, and its body was tightly bound, sealing his movements. Upon seeing the face of the otherworldly demonic tribe's royalty, it immediately gritted its teeth and roared in hostility, "Kill me if you want to, but don't even dream of making me betray my master." At the same moment, in a magnificent courtyard within the Master Teacher Academy, an elder abruptly stood up. "Mu Shi, what's wrong?" a calm voice asked by the side. If the head of the apothecary school was here, he would surely recognize the owner of the voice was the junior whom Mu Shi recommended here, Luo Ruoxin. "Lady Ruoxin. I think I sense the aura of Byzantium Helios beast." Mu Shi replied. Strangely, his attitude was extremely respectful, unlike how one would usually treat a junior. Most likely, Luo Ruoxin might really be a lady from one of the sage clans, just as everyone had guessed. Chapter 749, Fatal Danger, Byzantium Helios Beast. The young lady frowned. Do you mean the tamed beast of the old principal? That's the case. Mu Shi nodded. I am an old friend of the old principal, so I am familiar with his tamed beast as well. Even though the aura is extremely weak, I am certain that it is him. As a close friend of the missing old principal, he was acquainted with Byzantium Helios beast as well. It was just this afternoon that he heard that the other party had been kidnapped by the otherworldly demonic tribe, so how could he remain calm when he sensed his aura at this very moment? Knowing what Mu Shi was thinking, the young lady said, Go and take a look then. Yes. Mu Shi nodded in gratitude before rushing in the direction of where the aura was coming from. Watching Mu Shi's departing back, Luo Ruoxin sighed deeply. Since it's so easy for him to find what he seeks, why can't it be the same for me? If only I'd known earlier, I'd have brought that with me. Now that I can only sense the rough region where it is, who knows how long it'll take before I can find it. Rubbing her glabella, she shook her head before turning her gaze back to the night sky. Just like that, the young lady stared deeply into the depths of the night sky, creating a transient painting of tranquility. Ha, you sure are loyal to your master. Seeing the Byzantium Helios beast declaring his fealty to his master, Zhang Xian shook his head. Who knew what kind of magic potion the otherworldly demons fed this fellow for it to obstinately hold on to their secrets despite the beatings it had taken? Are you really not afraid of death? Zhang Xian asked coldly. What is there to fear from death? If I can be with my master after death, why should I be afraid? The Byzantium Helios beast roared. This fellow. Zhang Xian shook his head. The other party was extremely adamant on his view, unwilling to budge in the least. What in the world was this? The spirit beasts whom he had met before would usually be settled with just a kick or two, but not only did this fellow refuse to submit after all that beating, it still remained obstinately loyal to its previous master. Honestly speaking, even Zhang Xian was feeling a little impressed by now. Its willpower was indeed commendable. This place isn't wide enough. Seeing that the other party was unwilling to submit, Zhang Xian was just about to give it another beating when he looked at the cramped room he was in and frowned. The residence which Sun Chang had gotten them was simply too small. If he were to summon the puppets here to pummel the Byzantium Helios beast, the entire residence might just be torn down by them. If even this residence were to be destroyed, where else would his students stay? He had already used up his money on this residence, so it was impossible to purchase another one at this point. Forget it, I'll head outside the city then. Zhang Xian muttered. As long as he traveled a fitting distance away from the city walls, he should be able to do as he pleased without alarming anyone. With such a thought in mind, he flicked his wrist and placed that fellow back into the myriad anthive nest. After which, he walked out of his room, activated the red dust heaven ascending steps, and headed to the skies. As the residence was located in a rural part of the city, there were almost no guards or sentries stationed nearby, so there was no need for him to restrict himself. Furthermore, as unlikely as it would still be better to have the great violet wing beast guard the residence in case the Spirit Emporium sent another wave of assassins for them. When it came to the safety of his students and butler, it was better to be safe than sorry. Right after Zhang Xian left the residence, another figure soaring through the night sky came to an abrupt halt. His aura disappeared. A white-bearded elder looked around him in confusion and frowned. Mu Shi. As soon as he sensed the Byzantium Helios beast's aura, he immediately rushed over. But just as he was about to zero in on the source of the aura, it abruptly vanished, as if it had never been there in the first place. Was he captured once more? Mu Shi frowned. Even though he had declared that anyone who found the Byzantium Helios beast would be declared as the next principal, this didn't mean that he should remain idle when an opportunity to save the latter appeared before him. The Byzantium Helios beast was the tamed beast of his old pal, and he had slain many otherworldly demons in his time, saving countless humans from harm. There is someone there. Scanning the area, Musher suddenly spotted a silhouette on the horizon. Even though he couldn't determine the extent of the other party's cultivation, he should still be a saint at the very minimum, considering that he was capable of flight. To be traveling in the middle of the night, there's something amiss here. Musher frowned. I should go over and take a look. With such a thought in mind, he rushed toward the silhouette. Every single Saint Realm expert in Hongyuan City wielded immense prestige, and very few of them would choose to travel in the night. On top of that, the other party appeared as soon as the Byzantium Helios beast's aura vanished. This made the situation even more suspicious. Someone is following me. In the midst of his flight, Zhang Xian suddenly noticed something, and his eyelids started twitching. His current plan was simple: find a quiet place, teach the Byzantium Helios beast a lesson, and force it to spew out the whereabouts of the otherworldly demons it was serving. Who would have thought that he would be followed as soon as he left his residence? To be able to mobilize even Saint Realm experts, it seems like the water in the Spirit Emporium runs deeper than I thought. Considering how his pursuer was flying in midair as well, there was no doubt about it, he was a Saint Realm expert. This fellow appeared right after he had subdued the 4 masked men, so the chances were that the Spirit Emporium had sent him here as well. To have such an expert make a move over just that bit of wealth, the Spirit Emporium sure was persistent. Could it be that there are some precious artifacts amongst the items received from the mystical treasure hall that I don't know of? As he had obtained simply far too many objects from the mystical treasure hall, he hadn't bothered checking them properly. However, considering that it was from Huanyu Empire, it should be unlikely for it to be worth much in Hongyuan Empire. Yet, the Spirit Emporium actually mobilized a Saint Realm expert for his possession. This was no different from making a mountain out of a molehill. I should lure him out of the city and get rid of him. The more Zhang Xian thought about it, the more furious he felt. To send one wave after another, was the Spirit Emporium not tired of such games yet? Dispatching 4 ethereal treading experts is already bad enough, but to even mobilize a Saint Realm expert for us. Are you really that intent on seeing me rip apart your organization? So what if your men have reached Saint Realm? Not even the Byzantium Helios beast could subdue me, let more your men. If a war is what you want, I don't mind allowing Vicious and the otherworldly demon puppets to make another appearance. Did you think that you could climb over my head just because I am a newcomer in Hongyuan City? No, I should still hold myself back. The Byzantium Helios beast has pledged allegiance to the otherworldly demonic tribe, so there is no harm in killing him. However, the enemy this time around is a human, and the Spirit Emporium is aware of this operation as well. If the other party were to be killed and an investigation were to be conducted, I might risk exposing the existence of the otherworldly demon puppets. While Zhang Xian wanted to eliminate the conceited fellow pursuing him, he knew that he mustn't act recklessly. Saints were the top powers in the city. The death of any single one of them would cause a huge uproar, so it would be best to avoid that altogether. On top of that, given that the Saint Realm expert was dispatched to deal with Sun Chang, the Spirit Emporium would surely know that their group was the culprit. If the Spirit Emporium were to pull some strings and make a case against them, Zhang Xian might eventually come under scrutiny as well. And if the otherworldly demon puppets and Vicious were revealed to be in his possession in the midst of the investigation, it would be difficult for him to account for that. After all, how could a mere 4-star master teacher possess the ability to tame the head of the otherworldly demons and make those puppets obey his orders obediently? There was no way he could absolve himself of blame once this was exposed, so he had to ensure that he wasn't put into such a situation in the first place. But if I don't get rid of him, that will be a potential threat looming above me. What can I do? Considering the vicious deeds that the Spirit Emporium had committed over the years, what if the Saint Realm expert were to lay their hands on him, or even worse, his students? He couldn't possibly just sit idly and watch it all happen. Seems like it's about time to let Yang Shi make an appearance. After a long moment of hesitation, Zhang Xian made up his mind. With his current capability, without tapping into the strength of vicious or the otherworldly demon puppets, it was impossible for him to stand against a Saint Realm expert. The only way he could get out of this situation was to hoodwink the other party. This wasn't his first time doing something like this anyway. As long as the other party acknowledged him as his teacher, the Spirit Emporium would be unable to send the other party after him. With these thoughts in mind, Zhang Xian began reshaping his appearance to take on Yang Xian's form. As his mastery of Heaven's Path golden body deepened, he became more and more proficient in warping his muscles to alter his physical appearance, making it difficult for even a 6-star pinnacle master teacher to see through the disguise. Not even Mo Gaoyuan had suspected that he and Yang Shi were the same person back then. Considering that his back was against the other party, it was late at night, and the other party hadn't seen his appearance yet, he should be able to discreetly alter his appearance without the other party noticing. After warping his appearance, he drove his Heaven's Path Shinchi to alter the aura around him to create a fleeting and unfathomable impression. When all was done, he heaved a sigh of relief before discreetly sending a glance behind. Flaws. Zhang Xian muttered internally. In a sense, the flight of a saint could be considered as the execution of a battle technique as well as it required one to drive their Shinchi, so he was able to compile a book on the other party via the Library of Heaven's Path. Wang. The Library of Heaven's Path jolted as a book materialized. As Zhang Xian's body continued soaring ahead, his consciousness was already immersed in the Library of Heaven's Path, reading the book which had just been compiled. Mu Yuan, 7-star master teacher from the Qingyuan Conferred Empire Master Teacher Pavilion. Saint Realm 3 Dan Cultivator. Flaws. 7-star master teacher. Saint Realm 3 Dan Cultivator. Zhang Xian's lips twitched as he nearly fell from the sky. What was with the backing of the Spirit Emporium? How could they possibly be able to mobilize a 7-star master teacher as well? Why would someone of the other party's standing travel all the way from the Qingyuan Conferred Empire Master Teacher Pavilion just to grab his possessions? Was this for real? It's fortunate that I didn't bring out the puppets, or else the one who would have been destroyed is me. While Zhang Xian felt frustrated inside, he also felt relieved as well. He could easily deal with Saint 1 Dan and 2 Dan's spirit beasts with his bunch of puppets, but it would be a little iffy when it came to 3 Dan. At Saint 1 Dan Void Pursuit Realm, saints would open the Zhukong Acupoint, thus gaining the ability of free flight. At Saint 2 Dan's Spiritual Perception Realm, saints would open their incipient eye, allowing them to extend their psyche over a distance, perceiving everything within their range spiritually. Saint 3 Dan Embryonic Soul Realm was, in some ways, similar to Chrysalis Realm. In the latter, one would gather the Jinqi stored within the Dantian to forge an embryonic core, otherwise termed as Golden Core. As for the former, an embryonic soul reminiscent of an infant would break out of the embryonic core. As a result, this realm was also termed as Origin Soul Realm. Once one's soul had been tempered into an origin soul, it would be able to tap into the power of the world. At this realm, one could be considered to have taken one's first step into sainthood, gaining the ability to overturn oceans and move mountains at a thought. Furthermore, this would be done not through brute force but via Jinqi itself. Against a Saint 2 Dan, Zhang Xian's 20 otherworldly demon puppets could still overwhelm them with numbers. However, if the enemy was an embryonic soul realm expert, such a strategy wouldn't work. Even if he were to call upon vicious prowess as well, it was impossible to tell if that fellow had any other trump cards up his sleeves. If he wanted to call upon the otherworldly demon puppets and vicious, he would have to be completely certain that he would be able to kill the other party. Otherwise, it would bring endless trouble upon him. Forget it, I should see what kind of flaws he has and use it against him. Since neither fight nor flight was an option, he could only rely on his glib tongue to hoodwink the other party into obeying his commands. Success, he would be spared from danger, but failure, he would be squashed on the spot. Swiftly browsing through the other party's flaws, Zhang Xian suddenly saw something that left his mouth widened and eyes bulging. This. Chapter 750, Who Are You? The content of the book was simply too shocking. Even with Zhang Xian's worldliness, he still found it hard to believe his eyes. Forget it. However, this wasn't the time to touch on that, so he swiftly closed the book and went through the contents once more in his head. After ensuring that everything was correct, he drove his Jinqi and abruptly stopped in midair. Flinging his sleeves, he placed his hands behind his back and stood silently, not even bothering to turn his head around. For an instant, his dashing profile resembled an immortal departing on the clouds. The friend behind, surely you should be contented with following me this far. His cold voice echoed in the night sky. Oh, I sensed the aura of a close friend, so I came over to take a look. On my way, I happened to catch sight of you, and my curiosity got the better of me. However, I must say that you do look rather unfamiliar. Are you from Hengyuan City? Mu Shi replied with a smile. Even though he suspected that the man standing before him was related to the disappearance of Byzantium Helios beast, he had no concrete evidence to prove it, so there was no way he could accuse the other party of the matter. Thus, he decided that he would engage the other party in a conversation in hopes of uncovering some clues from his words. Standing with his back facing the other party, Zhang Xian harumphed. As a master teacher from Qingyuan conferred empire, how many of Hengyuan City's experts could you possibly know? You know that I'm from Qingyuan conferred empire? Mu Shi was taken aback. All along, the other party hadn't even turned around, and he didn't reveal his true cultivation either. How did the other party know that he was from Qingyuan conferred empire? The convergence of Jinqi at the Yehai acupoint before flowing through the three mystic acupoints, Nihai, Wuwei, and Durang. Gathering the wood attributes spiritual energy from the world to nourish your body, but skipping out on the Huaihai and Longzhen acupoints. Such a bizarre cultivation technique doesn't exist in Hengyuan City, or even in Qingyuan conferred empire at that. If I'm not mistaken, you must be a member of the Mu clan, one of the sage clans, an impassive voice explained from the front. Who are you? Alarmed, Mu Shi narrowed his eyes. There was nearly no one who knew that he was from the Mu clan, and this included his closest friends in Qingyuan conferred empire as well. Yet, the other party spoke of it casually as if it couldn't be any more obvious. What was the identity of the man standing before him? On top of that, the Jinqi circulation method that the other party had just mentioned was a secret art of the Mu clan, exclusive to their own clansmen. How could the other party know about it? Could he be a member of the Mu clan as well? Astonished, Mu Shi immediately extended his spiritual perception over and examined the man in front of him, only to realize that he was peering into an abyss. The other party's aura was so profound and deep that all he could manage was to scratch at the surface. Considering that the other party could see through his identity and cultivation with a glance, but he wasn't able to do the same. Could it mean that the man before him was even stronger than he was? Since when had there been such an expert in Hengyuan City? Who am I? Upon hearing Mu Shi's question, the man seemed to have been thrown into an ocean of nostalgia. Eventually, he shook his head and replied, "It seems it has been far too long since my last appearance that those of the younger generation can't even recognize me." There was a short moment of silence before the man continued asking impassively, "Who is the current head of the Mu clan?" Mu Shi was reluctant to respond to that question, but after a moment of hesitation, he still decided to speak up. "The current clan head is my uncle, Mu Yan." "May I ask if the senior in front knows of my uncle?" The current head of the Mu clan, Mu Yan, wielded immense reputation within the master-teacher pavilion of conferred empires, so there was nothing much for him to hide. He phrased his words carefully to indicate his identity as well, in hopes that he could exert some pressure on the other party and gain dominance over this exchange. Mu Yan. The figure in front shook his head. Never seen him before. However, I did meet with his father on one occasion. Father? You mean old ancestor Mu Tian? Mu Shi froze for an instant before shock embraced every inch of him. Mu Yan's father, as well as Mu Shi's grandfather, Mu Tian, was an ancient relic whose age exceeded 1300. While sainthood did alter the fundamental nature of one's existence, allowing one to live a lifespan exceeding that of ordinary humans, 1,000 years was usually the limit for most. Never had there been a saint who had gone beyond 2,000 years in age before. Thus, those who had lived beyond 1,000 could be considered an old ancestor of the clan, and they would hardly leave the confines of the main residence. To have met with old ancestor Mu Tian. Could the man be another old monster from the same era as him? But that was impossible. Even if those from that era was still living at this point in time, they wouldn't dare to travel beyond the confines of their residence so easily. In order to clutch onto the final sparks of life, they had to utilize all kinds of means. Otherwise, the heavens would mercilessly fall upon them and reap their lives. While he was unable to see through the cultivation of the man, he could clearly feel the overwhelming vitality within his body. This was unlike the wither that those old monsters suffered from. Yes, that lad Mu Tian. The man spoke deeply, his voice carrying the vicissitudes of life. Lad. Mu Shi's eyebrows shot up. Old ancestor Mu Tian was a 1,300-year-old ancient relic, and yet the other party called him a lad? Just as Mu Shi was overwhelmed with shock, the person in front of him spoke up once again. The Jinqi of your Mu clan is centered around balance and harmony, allowing them to conceal their aura at will. However, your aura feels unstable, and it seems like your meridians have grown rigid. It seems like it has been many years since you have last returned to your clan. The other party was right, it had indeed been many years since he last returned to the Mu clan. It was to the point where most of those in the Mu clan had already forgotten about his existence. Your aura feels heavy. Wood attribute Jinqi should be ethereal, but I can feel the heaviness of the metal attribute within it. If I'm not mistaken, it isn't that you are unwilling to return to your clan, but that you were expelled from it, that voice continued. How did you know? Shocked, Mu Shi nearly lost control of himself and plummeted to the ground. The other party's deductions were spot on. The reason why he hadn't returned to his clan after so many years was not because he was unwilling to, but that he had been expelled and he was too ashamed to return. However, this was a secret he had hidden in the depths of his heart, and he had never spoken about it to another soul before. On the other hand, the Mu clan regarded it as a huge humiliation, so it was impossible for them to have leaked the news either. How did the man before him learn of this matter? Did he really guess this much just by peering into his Jinqi circulation? If that was the case, wasn't the man before him a little too overpowered? How could there be a person in the world with such discerning eyes? As a person who cultivates wood attribute Jinqi, your Yingtai and Tianmen acupoints should have a slight tinge of green, but it is taking on a dark shade of red instead. With just a glance, one can tell that it's the result of conflicting energies within your body. Of the 5 elements, wood curbs earth, earth curbs water, water curbs fire, fire curbs metal, and metal curbs wood. The only element that could cause such immense damage to your body is metal. If I'm not mistaken, someone must have planted some form of metal attribute energy within your body, thus suppressing your cultivation and talent, the man in front replied. Mu Shi's body stiffened. Every single word that the other party spoke dredged up the secrets which he had sealed in the bottom of his heart, leaving him terrified and apprehensive. The other party was right, he was indeed expelled from his clan. However, it wasn't that he was framed, but that he had committed an unforgivable act. The story had to be traced back to 500 years ago. Back then, the young and talented him had become a 6-star master teacher before even reaching his 40s, making him a celebrated genius within the clan. He'd thought that with such talent, even at the very worst, he would become one of the core elders of the clan and leave his mark in history. Who could have known that, in one of the experiential training sessions, he would meet with a fair maiden whom, after going through a life-and-death situation with, he would deeply fall in love with. He'd thought that even if nothing else in this world was constant, their love would be perpetual. He devoted his entire life to her, even going to the extent of imparting his clan's exclusive cultivation technique to her. But eventually, he found out that the other party was making use of him to exact vengeance on his clan. His clan soon learned of this issue, and with the crime of leaking out the clan's confidential secrets and bringing an enemy into their midst, he was expelled from the clan. After leaving the clan, he learned that the woman had planted a metal attribute energy deep inside his body at some point, suppressing his cultivation. As a result, despite 500 years of effort, he had only managed to progress from 6-star to 7-star high tier, unable to advance any further than that. Ashamed, he had always hidden this wound in the depths of his heart, unwilling to reveal it to anyone else. But the other party was able to see through it just by looking at his acupoints and jinqi. Even 7-star master teachers didn't possess such an eye of discernment. Could he be an 8-star master teacher? But how could that be? Beyond 6-star, every single rank progression would become exponentially more difficult, as if trying to surmount a mountain that became increasingly steeper with every step taken. Take him for example, it had been 300 years since he had become a 7-star high-tier master teacher, but he was still unable to take the next step forward. As such, 8-star master teachers were extremely rare, and each and every one of them was a well-known figure whose reputation resounded throughout the master teacher continent. If the other party was an 8-star master teacher, he should have at least heard of him. But the other party didn't seem to fit any of the profiles of the 8-star master teachers he knew. Furthermore, why would an 8-star master teacher appear in Hongyuan Empire? With your cultivation suppressed by the metal attribute energy within you, you know that it is impossible for you to progress any further in your cultivation. Thus, you decided to stop cultivating altogether and spend your time with nature instead. So many years have already passed, don't you want to return back to your Mu clan and visit your family? The man in front asked. Even if I wish to return, how can I? Mu Shi's face flushed in agitation. His clan was where his family and friends were, how could he possibly not want to return? But how could he return? Putting aside how his cultivation was beginning to decline under the backlash of the metal attribute energy within his body, just the deed he had done 500 years ago left him too ashamed to return. It was fate that I met that lad Mu Tian many years ago, and it's also fate that we met one another. Since that's the case, allow me to offer a pointer then. Perhaps, you might be able to break out of the chains you're trapped in. The man in front waved his hands. Pointer. Mu Shi was surprised by those words. That's right. While it's hard for you to expel the metal attribute energy in your body due to your cultivation being suppressed by it, it isn't entirely impossible to do it. I'll impart a jinqi circulation method to you, and as long as you practice it diligently, recovery won't be an issue, the man in front said. You will impart a jinqi circulation method to me? Who are you? Mu Shi narrowed his eyes. In fear of crossing the laws of the world, high-ranked master teachers wouldn't offer their guidance to anyone easily, unless there was a karmic debt involved. Take Emperor Kong Shi for example, even though he was known to have more than 3,000 students, only 72 of them had received his true heritage. It was the first time that the both of them had met, so why should the other party offer him a pointer? He might have been a genius when he was younger, but with his bodily function deteriorating and his cultivation declining, the potential he once wielded had already been sapped dry. What was the other party's goal for helping him? The ploy he had fallen into when he was younger had already cost him dearly, he wouldn't allow himself to fall into another scheme easily. Who am I? The figure in front burst into laughter. Are you doubting my identity? Hong Long. As soon as those words were spoken, an overwhelming aura abruptly burst from that man's body. Upon feeling the oppressive aura that the other party was exerting, Mu Shi's body tensed up, and his blood ran cold. Before the compelling might of the other party, the strength which he had always taken pride in seemed as weak as a measly ant's. It was as though, If the other party willed it so, he could be torn to shreds the very next moment. Hung long long. Just as he was being suffocated by the immense power crushing down on him, the other party's aura abruptly changed. This time, it felt as if it harnessed the might of the world around him, creating an inviolable authority to his presence. It was as if the man before him was acknowledged by the heavens, his presence carrying the weight of the world itself. There was no being that was worthy of standing as an equal with him. Celestial Master Teacher. You are a celestial master teacher. A thought flashed across Mu Shi's mind, and his body began shaking uncontrollably. Chapter 751, Grand Teacher. Celestial Master Teachers possessed the recognition of the heavens. Their aura carried the might of the world, forcing all beings to submit to them. In the long history of the Master Teacher continent, the only man who was known to have become a Celestial Master Teacher was only Kong Shi himself. Even his direct disciples, the 72 sages, hadn't reached such a level, and yet the man before him was actually a Celestial Master Teacher. A freezing chill ran through Mu Shi's body, and the immense fear he felt left him incapable of speaking. A celestial master teacher was in existence whom even the heavens recognized, and yet he actually doubted such a person. At this moment, he was really dying to give himself 2 sharp slaps for the foolishness he had spouted. Who? Amidst his trembling, the figure ahead of him casually waved his hands, and that terrifying aura vanished instantaneously, returning an unnerving calm to the night. At the same time, the figure turned around as well. He was a middle-aged man somewhere between his 30s and 40s. He had a pair of sharp eyes that were gleaming with wisdom, and vaguely, one could see several thin strings floating within. Eye of Insight. Mu Shi's body trembled in shock yet again. Even though it was said that a master teacher could comprehend Eye of Insight upon reaching 6th star, the truth was that only the greatest of geniuses were able to do so. Even within the sage clans, it was extremely rare to see anyone comprehending the Eye of Insight. Putting everything aside, even him, a famed genius of the Mu clan back in his days, didn't succeed in comprehending the Eye of Insight. If only he had comprehended it, he wouldn't have been toyed with by another back then, resulting in his current plight. Of the 10 great master teachers in Hongyuan Empire, not a single one of them had comprehended the Eye of Insight. Through this, it could be seen how difficult the feat was. This explained why the other party was able to see through his problems with just a glance and deduce that he was expelled from the Mu clan. Probably only someone who possessed the Eye of Insight would be able to do so. At this instant, the final sliver of doubt that Mu Shi harbored finally vanished, leaving nothing but respect for the man before him. Not daring to pull his weight before the other party, he bowed deeply and said, "I apologize for my insolence. I beseech Elder to enlighten me." "All right." The middle-aged man nodded. "That's more like it. You should be glad that I don't have the interest of squabbling with a junior. Stand still and don't resist it." The middle-aged man raised his hand and flicked his finger. Suddenly, Mu Shi felt a jolt run through his body as a Jinqi circulation method suddenly came into his mind. Every single word was extremely vivid, as though they were imprinted right onto his consciousness. Soul impartation. Mu Shi's face paled. As a 7-star master teacher, his soul was already sufficiently powerful to conduct soul impartation as well. However, to do it from such a far distance away, and for the content to be so clearly imprinted into his mind at that. Not even an 8-star low-tier master teacher could do that. Fearsome. As expected of a celestial master teacher. The Huaihai and Longjin acupoints represent water and dragon respectively. Those are the acupoints where water attributes spiritual energy usually gathers in the human body. Due to the unique cultivation technique of the Mu clan, it's inevitable that you avoided channeling spiritual energy into those 2 acupoints. However, with your wood attribute Jinqi suppressed by the metal attribute energy, you could use these 2 acupoints to your advantage and resolve your problem. In the elemental cycle, water gives rise to wood. It can empower your wood attribute Jinqi, giving you the strength to overwhelm the metal attribute energy rampaging within your body. After imparting the relevant knowledge, the middle-aged man explained it impassively with his hands behind his back. At this point, Mu Shi had also just finished looking through the Jinqi circulation method which the other party had imparted him. Even though the middle-aged man only touched on the very foundation of cultivation, it was directed toward the root of Mu Shi's problem. It was as if the clouds which had veiled his eyes had parted all of the sudden, and before him lay a brand new world. If he were to practice the Jinqi circulation method, he was confident that he would be able to suppress the metal attribute energy in his body easily. Perhaps, after a 300-year stagnation, he might finally be able to take another step forward once more. To be able to see through the problems in his cultivation and offer a solution to it. The man before him was truly fearsome. Bowing politely, Mu Shi asked, "Teacher, I am deeply grateful to you for your enlightenment. If it's not beyond me, may I ask for your esteemed name?" As simple as the other party's teachings might have been, it had resolved the issues which had plagued him for several centuries. Considering what the other party had done for him, it wouldn't be too much to address him as teacher. Besides, if he could acknowledge such a formidable man as his teacher and receive his guidance, he might just be able to return to his clan one day. "Teacher." The middle-aged man opposite to him frowned. It seemed as if he was displeased with that address. "I apologize, I seem to have been getting ahead of myself. Given that you are a peer of my old ancestor, I should be calling you Grand Teacher." Mu Shi suddenly realized the other party's ties with his old ancestor, so he swiftly changed his words with a fearful shudder. "Ah." Hearing Mu Shi's words, the middle-aged man seemed to become even more astonished. Naturally, the middle-aged man was Zhang Xian. The reason he'd assumed Yang Xian's identity was in hopes that he could strike fear into the heart of the other party and resolve the current crisis he was in. He'd thought that with the Jinqi circulation method he had imparted, the other party would consider him as a half-teacher, and that would make him abandon all malicious thoughts against him and his students. Who would have thought that under his hoodwinking, the other party would actually end up acknowledging him as his teacher? No matter what, the other party was a 7-star master teacher. With such prowess, he could be considered a top-tier power in conferred empires. For such a figure to acknowledge him as his teacher, it was no wonder that he would be shocked, so he ended up hesitating for an instant. Who could have thought that the moment of hesitation would cause a misunderstanding that resulted in the other party addressing him as Grand Teacher instead? The heck! This change was a way too fast. But since the other party had already addressed him as Grand Teacher, it would be awkward to get him to address him as teacher instead. Thus, Zhang Xian nodded and said, "I am Yang Xian." Yang Xian. Mu Shi nodded as he jotted down the name in his head. "May I know where I can find Grand Teacher if I have any questions for you in the future? It is the work of fate that we met, and it has come to an end with my impartation. If fate wills it, we will meet once more. Otherwise, it can only mean that our paths aren't meant to intersect." Zhang Xian waved his hands. It was too tiring for him to put on an act before a 7-star master teacher. He was already exhausted with just a few minutes of disguise, how could he possibly do it in the long run? Thus, it would be best if they never meet again anymore. Seeing that the other party was unwilling to get too involved with him, Mu Shi could only clasp his fist and bow to bid the other party farewell in disappointment. By the time he raised his head once more, the elder before him had already vanished amidst the night sky. Yang Xian, Yang Shi. Reciting the other party's name in his heart, Mu Shi sighed deeply. With this matter dealt with, he returned to searching the area for the Byzantium Helios beast, but with no results whatsoever, he could only return to the academy helplessly. That was close. After getting out of Mu Shi's range, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. He'd never thought that Mu Shi would actually be a member of a sage clan, as well as a 7-star master teacher. Why would a person of such strength and standing work for the Spirit Emporium? It seems like he was indeed looking for someone when he met me. Zhang Xian thought woefully. Just what kind of luck did he have? To think that even just a casual trip out of the city would end with him meeting such a formidable expert. It was fortunate that he had reacted swiftly to hoodwink the other party, otherwise who knew that would remain of him now? Forget it. Since my luck isn't too good today, I should return to my residence and rest for the day. I'll think about it after I tear down the Spirit Emporium tomorrow. Zhang Xian was still considering whether he should vent his anger on the Byzantium Helios beast, but considering the string of misfortunes he'd experienced today, he decided to drop the idea. Reverting back to his original appearance, Zhang Xian returned to his residence. When he walked in, he saw that the great violet-winged beast had already managed to make the four men bow to it in submission. Paying it no heed, Zhang Xian returned straight to his room and cultivated for a short moment. By the time he opened his eyes once more, the sun had already risen. Even though he hadn't slept the entire night, he still felt refreshed and energized. Stretching his back lazily, he walked out of his room. After eating breakfast, he called Jing Yang and the others over to decipher some of the intricacies in their cultivation technique before finally heading to the Spirit Emporium with the great violet-winged beast, Sun Chang, and the four masked men. The Spirit Emporium was the place where most valuable artifacts in Hongyuan City were traded. Even before reaching it, there was already a huge crowd in the area. This is a black market, so there is no prohibition on the sales of stolen items as well. On top of that, due to the shady background of these items, their price tends to be lower than the average market price, so it's quite popular among cultivators, Sun Chang explained. There were laws in Hongyuan Empire prohibiting robbery and related crimes, so it was impossible to sell stolen artifacts openly. As such, they could only be sold at a lower price in black markets, and the Spirit Emporium was the largest one in Hongyuan Empire. However, the low prices of its goods did attract a fair number of cultivators. After all, cultivating was an extremely money-burning activity. Just like Zhang Xian, most cultivators had no financial backing, so they had to find some way to earn their own spirit stones and resources to advance their cultivation. As such, they were more than glad to scrimp wherever they could. Soon, Zhang Xian arrived at a majestic building several dozen meters high. To think that the building is a complete system in itself. If I'm not mistaken, it seems to be a massive, engineered product by celestial designers. Zhang Xian narrowed his eyes. Despite the immense size of the Spirit Emporium, it felt like a single entity rather parts placed together. If his deduction wasn't off, there should be many mechanisms installed within the building to turn it into a massive system of mechanisms. As expected of the center of Hongyuan City's artifact market, even the venue was an incredible artifact in itself. If this building were to be put on sale, there was little doubt that it would fetch an astronomical price. Putting everything aside, it would probably take dozens of 5-star celestial engineers at least a year of hard work even if they were to work day and night without rest. Zhang Xian walked up to the wall and placed his hand against it. After looking through the details in the Library of Heaven's Path, he nodded in commendation before following the crowd into the building. The interior of the building was nothing short of magnificent. All kinds of artifacts were laid around the main hall, and each of them was of decent grade. Even though there was no price labeled on them, considering how so many people were rushing to obtain them, they should be at an affordable range. Young master, look. At that moment, Sun Chang's tense voice sounded as he pointed at a certain direction. Zhang Xian traced his finger and saw a patrol team walking around the area. There were 6 members in the team, and each of them possessed a cultivation of Transcendent Mortal 8 Dan at minimum. The one standing at the very front, presumably the leader of the group, was a Transcendent Mortal 9 Dan Chrysalis Realm expert. The patrol team is in charge of maintaining order within the Spirit Emporium. If anyone were to cause trouble in the area, they would be kicked out in an instant, Sun Chang explained. Zhang Xian nodded slightly in response. With so many artifacts lying around the room, and not to mention the vile deeds the Spirit Emporium did in the shadows, if they didn't possess some backing and power, their business would have long been overturned by rivals and enemies. This. Doubtful, Sun Chang opened his mouth to say something, but he eventually closed it hesitantly. Wasn't the young master here to wreak havoc in their place? But considering how even the patrol team possessed such astounding strength, how were they supposed to cause any trouble? Most likely, they would be thrown out as soon as they tried to start something. Knowing what Sun Chang was thinking about, a chilling smile surfaced on Zhang Xian's lips. Violence is not the only way to wreak havoc. Since the Spirit Emporium dared to lay its hands on his students and his butler, it must be taught a lesson. But was violence the only way to teach someone a lesson? They were in Hongyuan City, the capital of a Tier 1 empire, not some shady underworld city. On top of that, Zhang Xian was a master teacher himself, the role model of the populace. How could someone as noble as him possibly go around using his fists to beat others up? On the other hand, Sun Chang blinked in confusion, uncomprehending of what Zhang Xian was driving at. Just follow me. Zhang Xian chuckled as his eyes scanned through the various artifacts placed on the shelves. There was a wide assortment of items, ores, pills, armor, weapon, formation plates. Anything that a cultivator needed, it seemed as if one would surely be able to find it here. The cultivators in the area were also busy roaming the area, looking around for items suitable for their use. After a casual walk around the main hall, Zhang Xian abruptly came to a halt. With a faint smile, he instructed, "Get an attendant over." Yes. Sun Chang had no idea what the young master was up to, but since the latter had issued an instruction, he dared not hesitate. Thus, he immediately made his way to the front reception. Chapter 752, Zhang Xian buys an artifact. Not too long later, Sun Chang returned with an attendant. As soon as he caught sight of the young master, he couldn't help but freeze in shock. At this moment, the young master was wearing an extravagant robe that screamed exorbitance. In his hand was a foldable fan, which he was using to fan himself leisurely. An arrogant smirk sat on his lips. From afar, it looked as if he was a profligate scion. What is the young master up to? Sun Chang thought in bewilderment. However, not wanting to foil the young master's ploy, he suppressed his astonishment and walked up to the ladder, clasped his fist, and greeted obediently, "Young master." Back in Tianxian Kingdom, the old master had also brought him to Tianyu trading firm once and behaved bizarrely. In the end, Ling Tianyu made a personal visit to their residence and even willingly gave up large sums of money to them. Could it be that the young master was trying the same tactic as well? Zhang Xian nodded before shooting a sideward glance at the attendant behind Sun Chang. "You are the manager here." The attendant smiled. "I am not a manager, but I should be able to answer most of your queries." The attendant was a young man who seemed to be in his early 30s, possessing the cultivation of Transcendent Mortal 5 Dan. As an attendant here, he was in charge of introducing and selling the products on display, so he did possess some authority here. "That's good. I wish to buy a few items, recommend me some of the more expensive artifacts here." Zhang Xian said proudly as he waved his fan leisurely. "Expensive artifacts?" Sun Chang's eyelids twitched. He had conducted business at one point in his life, so he understood the various conventions in the market. For fear of being taken advantage of, most buyers would choose to maintain a low profile, feigning a lack of money just to push down the prices. Yet, the young master had actually asked for the attendant to recommend the expensive artifacts. Wasn't this practically screaming, "I have too much money on hand, please take advantage of me"? Such a customer was a dream come true for any store attendant. They would be mistreating themselves if they didn't attempt to make a killing out of him. Wasn't the young master here to exact vengeance? Why did it seem as if he was trying to give money to the Spirit Emporium instead? As expected, upon hearing Zhang Xian's words, the eyes of the attendant immediately lit up. He immediately walked up to a nearby shelf and gestured toward an item. "Young master, this bronze gong is an excellent artifact smithied by a 6-star blacksmith. It has reached Spirit Intermediate tier. On the shelf was a bronze gong with several inscriptions on it. A cold gleam reflected off its surface. "Let me take a look." Zhang Xian gestured for the attendant to bring the bronze gong to him. "Sure." A gleam flickered across the attendant's eyes as he hurriedly took down the gong and passed it over respectfully with both hands. Zhang Xian casually took it and slapped it lightly with his palm. "Wang!" A resounding metallic call echoed from the gong, and a powerful gale swept into the surroundings, creating an immense pressure on the crowd in the area. "This is good stuff." Nodding in satisfaction, Zhang Xian casually tossed the gong to Sun Chang before glancing leisurely at the attendant. "How much does it cost?" After a moment of hesitation, the attendant said, "Young master, this bronze gong was smithied personally by 6-star blacksmith Zhu Quan more than 100 years ago. Not only is it a powerful weapon, it can also be considered as a valuable antique with significant history behind it. To be honest, it's one of the top treasures of our spirit emporium, so the price might be a little steep. Here it comes." Sun Chang shook his head as he heard the words and the tone of the attendant. This fellow was indeed scheming. Seeing that the young master was a public gold mine, he intentionally phrased his words in a provocative manner, suggesting that the bronze gong was beyond the financial ability of the young master. It was a cliché trick, but somehow, it was peculiarly effective on those prideful profligate scions. Just as Sun Chang was thinking that the attendant would be sorely disappointed, the calm young master of his suddenly harumphed coldly. "A little steep. Are you trying to say that I won't be able to afford it?" Sun Chang clutched his forehead and nearly burst into tears. "Young master. Are you sure that you are here for vengeance? Why does it seem like you are a new rich scion in town asking for others to scam you of your wealth?" "Of course not, there is no doubt that a man as noble as you will be able to afford it." As if embarrassed by his previous doubts, the attendant smiled awkwardly. After which, he gritted his teeth in hesitation, as if he was going to make a huge loss from this deal, before mustering up his determination and said, "This bronze gong is worth 5,000 middle-tier spirit stones, but your straightforward and candid personality has won my respect. Thus, if you really wish to buy it, I will negotiate with my manager to sell it to you at 3,000 spirit stones." 3,000? Sun Chang spewed a mouthful of blood. What else could this be if not daylight robbery? An attendant was marketing this bronze gong to another customer when he came yesterday, and the offered price was only 1,000 middle-tier spirit stone. But in the end, the customer turned down the deal. Yet, this attendant actually dared to say that it was worth 5,000, and even acted as if he was making a huge loss by selling it at 3,000. Did he take them to be fools? Just as Sun Chang was about to offer a word of advice to the young master, the latter nodded in satisfaction and said, "The work of a 6-star blacksmith is indeed worth such a price." Sun Chang, wrap it up. "I will be taking it." "You will be taking it?" Unable to believe his ears, Sun Chang's body swayed weakly. Did the young master eat something wrong this morning? Putting aside the fact that they didn't even have 3,000 middle-tier spirit stones with them at the moment, even if they did, they shouldn't waste it on something as useless as this. What 6-star blacksmith or Zhu Quan whatsoever, it was clear that was all bullshit. With that much money, one could easily afford a spirit high-tier weapon. Why would one spend it on this? But since the young master had said that he would be taking him, it would be inappropriate for him, as a servant, to refute his decision. Thus, he could only go along with it. The attendant also widened his eyes in surprise at the sight. He didn't think that Zhang Xian would take down the gong so swiftly. That useless object had already been sitting on their shelves for several months, and despite their best efforts, they hadn't been able to sell it out. Yet, the other party actually bought it without hesitation. It seemed like he had really happened upon an easy gold mine this time around. With a hand behind his back and the other fanning him leisurely, Zhang Xian said impatiently, "Is there anything more expensive and better in the store?" Don't tell me that the best product your spirit emporium has is only this spirit intermediate tier bronze gong. It was as if the item he had bought was too cheap, unworthy of someone of his standing. We do. Of course, we have far better products than the bronze gong. The attendant's eyes lit up. Just as he was about to lead the way to the other shelves, he suddenly paused for an instant before asking, "Young master, regarding the money for the bronze gong." It wasn't that he didn't trust the young man before him, but it was difficult to tell what could happen in the next moment. To be safe, it would be better for him to collect the money first. Are you suggesting that I'll renege on my payment? How dare you? As if his dignity had been sullied, Zhang Xian harumphed coldly. Just as he was about to fly to a temper, he suddenly fell into a momentary contemplation before saying, "Fine, take this. With this, you should work harder on finding items for me." With those words, he flicked his wrist and threw a spirit stone over casually. The attendant caught it and subconsciously glanced at the item in his hand. The next moment, he froze. High-tier spirit stone. The item that the other party had thrown over casually contained spiritual energy so pure that he could feel a tingling sensation in his skin. It was actually a high-tier spirit stone. High-tier spirit stones were only useful to Chrysalis realm experts and above. However, due to its rarity, often, only Saint realm experts would have it in their possession. Yet, the other party threw it to him so easily just to purchase the bronze gong. He couldn't help but feel his throat run dry. That's right. A high-tier spirit stone is worth 10,000 middle-tier spirit stone, so that should be enough to cover the bronze gong, right? Zhang Xian sneered coldly. Enough, it's more than enough. The attendant hurriedly nodded. All the doubts he harbored regarding the customer before him vanished in an instant. How could a person who would fork out a high-tier spirit stone easily possibly renege on his payment? Most likely, the other party was a young master from some wealthy clan, and having lived in luxury from young, he was accustomed to spending such large sums of money. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and lead the way. Zhang Xian snapped. Yes. After seeing the high-tier spirit stone, the attitude of the attendant became even more respectful than before. He hurriedly led them through the crowd, and soon, they arrived in the depths of the Spirit Emporium. There were significantly fewer people here, but those who were present here were notable personages in the capital. The items that were placed on the shelves in the room were also clearly much more valuable than those in the main hall. Zhang Xian swiftly scanned through the items. Spirit high-tier weapon, rare ores, a spirit fruit which can extend one's longevity. Under the discerning gaze of his eye of insight, he swiftly identified the various items in the room. As expected of the Spirit Emporium. Even to someone as picky as Zhang Xian, he couldn't help but feel a little moved by some of the items in the room. Suddenly, his gaze stopped on a certain artifact, and the edges of his lips crept up. Following which, he began walking toward a jade box on the shelf. Gesturing to the jade box, Zhang Xian asked, "What is this?" "This is a grade 6 bottleneck surmounting pill. A transcendent mortal 9 Dan expert can advance one's cultivation stage by consuming it, and there are no prerequisites to it. On top of that, it was forged by Vice School Head Luo of the Apothecary School personally, making it extremely valuable," the attendant said. Grade 6 bottleneck surmounting pill. The higher one's cultivation, the more difficult it would be to advance it. It was truly incredible for a pill to be able to raise a Chrysalis realm expert's cultivation by a single stage without any prerequisites to it. It was difficult to imagine the value of the pill. "Let me take a look," Zhang Xian said. "Ordinarily, we wouldn't allow anyone to touch it, but since you are the one who wishes to look at it, I'll bring it to you." Knowing that the man standing before him was a big fish, the attendant agreed with a smile. Zhang Xian nodded. The attendant stepped forward, opened the protective casing, took the jade box from the shelves, and opened it gently. Hong long. A surge of pure spiritual energy gushed from the box, leaving one feeling refreshed throughout. It felt like, if one consumed the pill, one would surely make immense progress in one's cultivation. Green mist drifted above the pill, and it felt as if it would morph into a dragon at any moment and escape. Despite only being formation grade, perhaps due to the valuable medicinal herbs involved in the forging process, it was still pulsating with energy. Most likely, its price would be exorbitant as well. It's a good pill. A grade 6 pill. Even if I wanted to buy it, I couldn't afford it at all. Indeed, it's too expensive. The surge of spiritual energy from the opening of the jade box had caught the eyes of many in the area. The guests who were browsing through the other artifacts shifted their attention to the source. Seeing that the pill was catching many gazes, Zhang Xian waved his hands and said, "Close the lid. This pill is not bad. How much does it cost?" "I'll take it." Hearing that the other party would take it, the attendant closed the lid swiftly and replied excitedly, "As this is a grade 6 pill forged by the vice-head of the apothecary school, using 81 different valuable herbs, it's inevitable that its price is higher than other pills. If you want it, you can have it at a discounted price of 2 high-tier spirit stone." 2 high-tier spirit stone? What kind of lousy price is that? Wasn't it 5,000 middle-tier spirit stones just a few days ago? When did the price inflate to 2 high-tier spirit stones? A huge commotion broke out in the area. Most of those gathered were frequent guests of the Spirit Emporium, so they had a rough gauge of the prices of the items displayed here. Even though the bottleneck surmounting pill had reached grade 6, it was only at a low tier. On top of that, the pill had barely achieved formation. As such, it was only worth 5,000 middle-tier spirit stones at most. To actually attempt to sell it for 2 high-tier spirit stones. That attendant must be out of his mind. Just as everyone thought that Zhang Xian would turn it down due to its exorbitant price, the other party glanced at the pill and said, "A grade 6 pill for 2 high-tier spirit stones, that isn't too expensive. I'll take it." "He's going by it?" Everyone was stunned. They had seen plenty of foolish men in their time, but never had they seen such a dimwit before. Did price not matter to him when it came to buying items? "That's great. I'll have it wrapped up for you right now." Upon hearing that Zhang Xian would buy it, the attendant leaped in joy. He hurriedly passed the jade box into Sun Chang's hands. However, at that moment, Zhang Xian abruptly frowned in worry and asked, "Could the items you sell possibly be fakes?" "Fakes? You sure are good at jesting," the attendant swiftly replied. "The items sold in our Spirit Emporium have undergone the appraisal of master appraisers, so it's impossible for there to be any fakes in here. If you were to find any fakes amidst our goods, our Spirit Emporium will refund you tenfold of the selling price." You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.